Okay. All right. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. Depending on from where you are joining, I have lots of people joining from various places, and there are some more people to come. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ananda Mahinkanda. I am coming from California, Samahitha Nature Foundation. And the whole purpose of having this lecture series is actually to educate, to create the awareness of how the plant-based and why the plant-based nutrition is important for us, our lives, especially in the Sri Lankan context. Our country is not doing very well right now. We have lots of food shortages, medicine, and in every family, it's very difficult to find a person, at least a family, without having at least one communicable disease like heart diseases, cancers, or diabetes. So there is an easy fix for these problems. And so we have a great doctor, a world figure, to talk about all these things, Dr. Michael Klaper. He's a very, very busy person. Anyway, we are very lucky to have him here. Let me give a little introduction about himself. It's not easy to give a good introduction because there are so many things to talk about him, but let me try. Dr. Klaper is a gifted clinician, internationally acclaimed medical educator, and sought after speaker on health and nutrition and diet. He is the founder of his nonprofit, Moving Medicine Forward, an educational initiative to educate as many new physicians as possible so that together we all can reverse the cause of diseases through plant-based nutrition. A long-time radio host and a pilot, Dr. Klaper has served as a nutrition advisor to NASA's space programs and on the nutrition task force of the American Medical Students Association. Dr. Klaper is the author of the famous Vegan Nutrition, Pure and Simple, and also the producer of the masterclass, Applied Nutrition and Plant-Based Disease Reversal, and has produced numerous health videos, webinars, and dozens of articles for both scientific journals and popular press. As a source of inspiration, advocating plant-based diet, Dr. Klaper contributed to the making of the two very famous PBS television programs, Food for Thought and the award-winning movie Diet for the New America. Dr. Klaper teaches that health comes healthy living. So he has featured in many other famous movies such as What the Health, Vegan 2017, Cowspiracy, Takeout. I think, Doctor, I have missed so many things here. I think you featured in Folks Over Nights, I believe. And if I remember correct, Eating You Alive. Those are great movies. And if someone has not watched these things, at least watch one of these things. We can discuss these things at the end. And Dr. Klaper served as the director of the Institute of Nutrition Education and Research from 1992 through 2015. He is also a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So for me, as a person, the most important thing is none of these things. He's a very kind, compassionate, such a wonderful person. When I look at his face, there's a glow. It's so nice. Doctor, thank you very much. And first of all, I have to again say that, you accepted this invitation without asking what is my fee or anything like that. So very, very, this kind of gestures are very, very rare in this present day world. Anyway, with me, before I hand over the audience to you, I want to recognize few people. So with me, Samahitha Nature Foundation, we have two institutions actually working with me for this great event and for the upcoming events. One is SHRI, Society for Health Research and Innovations, headed by Dr. Anuruddha Padaniya and Dr. Vasan Ratnasingham, and also local food promotion and monitoring task force attached to the President's Office in Sri Lanka. They are Dr. Kumudu Dahanayaka, Dr. Harris Patirage, Dr. Sujiva Vikramsinghe, and they're also right here joining. And I know Dr. Klaper has a very limited time, so we don't know how he's going to manage this, probably 1 hour, 15 minutes time. So after that, probably we have these doctors we get together and answer questions in Sinhala, and they can summarize what Dr. Klaper discusses today. And Doctor, give me another 1 minute just to speak a few words in Sinhala. So friends, මිත්‍රවරුනි, so මේ සාකච්ඡාව ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් අපි පවත්වන්නේ ලංකාවේ මේ තියෙන තත්ත්වය. කියන්නේ අපි ගොඩක් කට්ටිය ලෙඩ වෙලා ඉන්නේ. ඉතින් අපේ ආහාර පාන පිළිබඳ ආහාර පාන රටාව, ආහාර පාන වලින් අපිට කරගන්න පුළුවන් දේ, අපේ ආහාර අපි ලෙඩ සුව කර ගැනීමට යොදාගන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක ගැන අපට තියෙන දැනුම ගොඩක් අඩුයි. බටහිර ලෝකයේ මේ දැනුම ඇත්තටම ඉතාමත්ම ශීඝ්‍රයෙන් වර්ධනය වෙනවා. මිනිස්සු ගැන උනන්දු වෙලා තමන්ගේ ලෙඩ රෝග නිවාරණය කර ගැනීමට උත්සුක වෙනවා. ඉතින් අපේ ආහාරික කාලෙක අපේ ගෙවත්තේ තියෙන ආහාර ගොඩක් තියෙනවා අපට පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් අපි ඒ වගේ දේවල් ගන්නෙත් නැහැ. කඩින්ම අරගෙන මස් මාංශ ආදී අහිතකර දේවල් පාවිච්චි කරමින් ලෙඩ වෙලා මැරිලා යනවා. So අපේ රටේ ජනගහනයෙන් මැරෙන සංඛ්‍යාවෙන් 85% මැරෙන්නේ බෝ නොවන රෝග වලින්. ඒක බොහෝ දෙනෙක් දන්නේ නැහැ. අපි හදන ආහාර වලින්, දැන් උදාහරණයක් විදිහට බඩ ඉරුම් වගේ දෙයක් ගත්තොත් 85% මේ බඩ ඉරුම් පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ සතුන්ට කන්න දෙන්නේ. එතකොට අපේ ආහාරිකයට ප්‍රධාන හේතුවක් මේ ධාන්‍ය විශාල වශයෙන් සත්ත්ව පරිභෝජන සඳහා යොදා ගැනීම. ඉතින් මේවත් ගොඩක් ප්‍රශ්න. ඉතින් මම වැඩි වෙලාවක් ගන්න නැහැ. බොහොම ස්තුතියි ඔයගොල්ලෝ සම්බන්ධ වුණාට මේ සාකච්ඡාවට. So I am now going to hand over the audience to Dr. Michael Klaper. Dr. Klaper, thank you, and all yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to address this very important convocation. This is a career-changing, society-changing concept that we are discussing here, and there's much to cover. So let me start by sharing my screen here and start to play in full screen here. Yes, got it. Okay. Nope. All right, and let me get rid of the media controls and that. And why is this not? Yeah. Nope. No, this is not. Play the slide. Aha. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Mechanisms of disease reversal.
Right.
And very importantly, does it now change to topics to be covered? Sometimes it doesn't change. Can you see topics to be covered?
Yes, doctor.
Good. Okay. If the slides do not change, please let me know. So as advertised, we've got a lot of information to cover here on the topic of disease reversal through plant-based nutrition. So what we're going to cover in this next hour are the clinical improvements that doctors all over the world are reporting when they get their patients to change from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet. We're then going to talk about exactly what these foods are and why they might exert these specific beneficial effects. To understand why a plant-based diet helps, we have to start at the very beginning and look at what is it in the Western style diet that is infiltrating into the Asian cuisine and at ever greater degrees, and much to the embarrassment of this American physician that we have foisted our fast food culture onto the rest of the world here. But we need to talk about exactly what that kind of diet does to the human body. And then the most important thing is what happens when the food stream is changed from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet. We're going to focus in on two specific conditions to explore the actual mechanisms of disease reversal, namely atherosclerosis and type 2 diabetes. We're then going to quickly just touch on the literature supporting the benefits of plant-based nutrition in other inflammatory and degenerative conditions. And finally, the role of plant-based nutrition and dietitians in actual clinical practice. So with that, I'll tell you what you already know, that in Sri Lanka and throughout Southeast Asia, coronary artery disease is certainly on the increase. Accounts for 34% of deaths in Sri Lanka, along with strokes, the third cause of death. And you've also had an exponential increase in heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure. This is, of course, happening in my country and in societies around the world as they adopt to the Western fast food style of diet. And similar in my country as in yours, obesity is increasing among all age groups and both genders, with all the health ramifications of that growth and girth. And like most Westerners, the average Southeast Asian person is eating more on pretty much a daily basis, either meat, fish, dairy, fried foods, or excessive amounts of sugar and sweet desserts. This again is getting to be an echo of the fate befalling the Western societies that promulgate this type of processed food diet. Now, my career took a sudden change, as well as my insights into the effect of food on the body, when I joined the staff at True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, California, about an hour north of San Francisco. I was on their staff for 8 years. And during that time, I saw hundreds of patients come in with the standard Western diseases, which again, you folks are also dealing with. Rampant obesity. Most Americans are either overweight, if not clinically obese. Now, we saw clogged arteries manifesting as angina, claudication, runaway lipid levels, as well as high blood pressure, florid type 2 diabetes, and a host of inflammatory diseases affecting every organ system, from lungs to colon to joints to the immune system. This is the disease spectrum of Western medicine, which Asian physicians are now dealing with on a more regular basis. So what did we do when these folks come in? Did we raise their dosage of insulin and beta blockers? No, actually, we put them on a diet based on whole plant foods. Now, there's a Western style diet. We'll talk about foods that are more familiar to you. But at True North, we set out big plates of oat porridge in the morning with lots of fruit and slivered almonds. And lunches and dinners were similar. Every meal had a big, colorful green salad, hearty vegetable soups, big, generous helpings of steamed green and yellow vegetables, and a variety of hearty entrees, curries and chilies and stews and soups, along with associated grains, rice, millet, quinoa, and lots of colorful fruit for dessert. This was the food stream that we would have our patients run through their system, meal after meal, day after day. They would stay at the clinic for weeks eating this kind of food, a big departure from the foods they had been eating. But the changes we saw predictably were nothing short of spectacular. Medical school never prepared me for people transforming their health the way changing to a whole food plant-based diet proves itself to do reliably. The folks who came in overweight or obese began to lose weight dramatically. 3 pounds a week, 4 pounds a week were not uncommon at the beginning, and the blood and the obesity continues to decrease as the weeks go by. arteries begin to relax and dilate. That allows blood pressures to come down, allows us to reduce medications for hypertension. Inflammation throughout the body subsides, especially in the joints, and the folks with the inflammatory joint disease get relief from their pain when they move. Due to the high fiber diet of this fiber quality of this diet, now these folks often experienced normalization of bowel function. They had the first good bowel movement in years. Some of them would certainly improve their outlook on all of life there. But again, seriously, this really benefited their gut function, which benefits the rest of the body. The folks with the eczema and the psoriasis, as the days went on, saw these skin conditions improving. The asthmatic folks didn't need their inhalers so much. Most folks got more restful sleep, and we physicians were able to reduce or discontinue medications for hypertension, hyperlipidemia, inflammatory diseases. And we witnessed a phenomenon called disease reversal. We saw these diseases actually reversing. Now, not being one to throw terms around, what are we talking about when we say disease reversal? We're talking about two specific observable phenomena. We're talking about remission of clinical symptoms, the joints stop hurting, the lungs stop wheezing, the migraine headaches go away, as well as normalization of laboratory results. This is the hallmarks of disease reversal, and we saw these phenomena happening predictably. So as I became a student of the effects of plant-based nutrition upon the body, I began following the medical literature. And as I will share with you later in this presentation, there's now getting to be a growing literature in the medical journals supporting the effectiveness of plant-based nutrition for reducing these 9 common diseases that most of us spend our professional lives treating. I'm going to be focusing on the first 3 here, but there's a literature supporting plant-based nutrition as an effective therapeutic modality for all these conditions. So the focus of this presentation is, why does this work? Well, how does a plant-based diet, or how does changing from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet produce these remarkable clinical improvements? So to understand, or begin to understand, an automotive analogy might help us. Imagine you're driving your vehicle and you look at the petrol gauge and it's reading on empty or near it, and so you pull into the petrol station. But as you pull in, you notice that the diesel fuel is 6 cents a gallon cheaper than the petrol. And so the question for our example here: what if, to save money, you filled your petrol-burning car's fuel tank only 2/3 with petrol and 1/3 with diesel fuel? What would happen? Well, we all are aware that diesel fuel is essentially kerosene. It's oilier than petrol. It just doesn't burn cleanly in a petrol-burning engine. And so the results are predictable. The spark plugs are going to cake up with carbon deposits. The exhaust manifold is going to clog up. The catalytic converter will be ruined. The black smoke comes out of the exhaust. The driver thinks, my car's developed a disease. The car has not developed a disease. That engine malfunctioned precisely, predictably, as it would by putting the wrong fuel into an engine not designed to run on it. If you will, this is a transgression of natural law of automotives. Petrol-burning engines are supposed to run on petrol. If you put diesel fuel in there, you are violating a natural law. Well, that seems fairly obvious to understand. Is there an analogy with our body's metabolic engine? Well, of course, and we can look to other members of the animal kingdom to give us a big clue here. The reality is, despite the fondness for meat-based diets, anatomically and physiologically, we're basically plant-eating hominids. And we have much the same digestive system that our gorilla and bonobo cousins have. And they spend their lives in the rainforest eating a steady stream of leaves and fruits and vegetation throughout their lives. And notably, they do not develop atherosclerotic plaques in their arteries. They do not develop type 2 diabetes. They don't develop ulcerative colitis in the wild. They die of trauma and infections and parasites, but they don't develop the so-called diseases of civilization, big quotes around that, that all of us clinicians deal with these days. So The clue would be a whole food plant-based diet is, again, the fuel that this metabolic engine is supposed to run on. But instead of that fuel, the petrol in our petrol burning car, most folks in our practices wind up eating a diet based on overly processed meats, dairies, oils, sugar, salt. This is the food stream, like that oily kerosene that we are running through our system, and our engine malfunctions as well. And on a typical day, many folks in Asian nations have one or more meals that are just filled. Their fried foods are full of salt, sugar, oil, and oxidized meat fats, and we'll talk about them specifically. But let's talk about what each one of these meals actually does to our body and to our bloodstream. I wish someone had told me this in medical school. Now, starting at square one, if one eats a meal of whole plant foods, as we are advocating, without a lot of oil or ghee in it, just steam the vegetables, or use vegetable broth for sautéing, etc. What happens as the vegetables get out into the bloodstream? If you were then an hour later to draw the 5 cc's of blood into a red top tube and let it clot and spin it down to centrifuge and look at the serum is crystal clear. You can read newsprint through normal serum. This is what your blood should look like after you eat a meal. But if one indulges in the diet of meats and dairies and oils and processed foods, and you put that into your stomach and let it get absorbed, and an hour later you draw that same tube of blood, what you're going to see after you take it out of the centrifuge is blood that looks like this. It's quite lipemic. This is postprandial lipemia, and the serum is filled with triglycerides and saturated fats. Now, of course, not everybody shows the fat as optically densely as this, but everybody has a wave of fat that flows through their arteries after a fatty meal. How can you not? Where else is it going to go? And the blood stays fatty for a good 5 hours. Now, here's Kuo's classic study. They gave the patient a fatty meal at hour 0, and they drew blood once an hour for 6 hours. They took those 6 tubes and put them one after another into a spectrophotometer to see how fatty, milky the appearance of the serum is. You can see the blood getting fattier and fattier and fattier. It takes the liver a good 5 hours to begin to clear the fat.
Doctor, I think you got muted. 1 minute.
Oh my, let me see if I can get this up again here. Okay, can you see this now? Can you see the screen? Yes, no? Can you see the screen?
We see the screen, but we don't see your slides. It's a Zoom. I think
just see Zoom. All right, let me
okay. Now we see the main screen.
Let me share it again. Oh my. Okay. Screen sharing. So let me clear this out of them. Oh my, unfortunate. Can you see anything here now? Or does it just say Zoom?
Yeah.
Can you see anything at all? Can you see my slide? No.
No, Zoom.
Okay, let me end this here. Let me.
Are you sharing the screen, doctor? You go to share screen and.
Oh my. So let me try this and screen share. Okay.
Okay, you got it.
Can you see this?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, can you see this now? Okay.
Yes, doctor.
So While the blood is running thick with fat, disease processes are being spawned. Abnormal lipids, the elevated LDL increases, as well as the blood gets more viscous, it's thicker, it doesn't flow through capillary beds as well. The artery walls get injured and stiffen, blood pressure goes up. As the fat flows through the adipocytes in the abdomen, the fat sticks there and obesity increases. As the fat works its way into liver and muscle cells, it interferes with the insulin receptors. And so insulin resistance goes up, blood sugars go up. We'll talk about that in a moment. And because the saturated fats are pro-inflammatory, that inflammatory reactions throughout the body are promoted, part of the metabolic syndrome. So this happens after every fatty meal. And so, so if one eats, again, a fatty meal for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, and it takes 5 hours to clear each one of those fatty meals out of the bloodstream, people are walking around with their serum lipemic pretty much, or their plasma lipemic pretty much all day. This is not a normal state conducive with health. No other animal, and certainly no other primate, no gorilla, no bonobo does this, but we humans have a fondness for inflicting this upon our system. Now, I'm focusing on the fat here because it's the most visibly obvious marker of the effect of a meal upon the tissues, but there is more than fat in that blood. This is generally a high salt diet. There's salt in the meat, salt in the cheese, salt in the fries, salt in the chips, salt in the restaurant food. And we all well know that high salt diets can stiffen the arteries and make fluid be retained, raising high blood pressure. But we're also learning recently that high salt concentrations can trigger Th17 helper cells to open the door to autoimmune diseases like lupus. Who knew? But high salt diets are not favorable for good health for sure. And then there's sugar. We all have a sweet tooth, we have a fondness for it. I'm not talking about a little bit of brown sugar in your tea as a sweetening, as a flavoring. That's what it was meant for. I'm talking about eating sugar as a food. Now, when you eat one of these classic desserts, drink a cola drink, or eat a candy bar, now you're eating grams and grams of sugar as a food. And as a result, grams of fructose, maltose, dextrose flood through the tissues, and they stick to proteins all over the body. Proteins become glycosylated in the bloodstream and in the tissues. This is not a good thing because your own body heat will take these glycosylated proteins and oxidize them into forming what are called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, that are teeming with free radicals that rip electrons off of cell membranes and chromosomes and proteins, very destructive molecules. They're molecular terrorists. And these AGEs enter the blood either pre-formed, if the carbohydrates were cooked at high temperature, like with chips and cookies, etc. But also, if you just eat the sugars, your own body heat will run the Maillard reaction in your own tissues and wind up creating these AGEs. So this is how a lot of AGEs come into the body, through cooked carbohydrates and eating sugars. Now, it's one thing to have AGEs produced on the surface of a potato chip or in a cookie, but you don't want to run the Maillard reaction on the proteins in your own body. You don't want to run the Maillard reaction on the crystalline proteins in the lens of your eye, a great way to open the door to cataracts. You don't want to run the Maillard reaction on the elastin fibers in the skin. It's a great way to turn your skin into an old suitcase. And you sure don't want to run the Maillard reaction on the inner lining of the arteries of your brain. I will show you the effects on this and how it ties into vascular dementia. But it turns out, as I'm railing against high temperature cooking of carbohydrates and eating sugar as a food, those are not the main sources of AGEs in the Western style diet that is being promulgated these days. It turns out that the major source of AGEs in the modern diet is cooked meat. When you grill the burger, when you broil the steak, when you fry the chicken, Well, where's the sugar and the protein that get together? Here, the sugar is the glycogen in the muscle that gets heated up on the grill. It combines with the myosin protein in the muscle, and the heat from the flame creates the AGEs. And it turns out that the cooked meats cause by far more AGE productions, and that's a problem in the blood vessels of the brain. Here you see the middle cerebral arteries of two men who died at the same age. This man in the upper panel did not have Alzheimer's dementia. This man did. And you can see the artery walls are thickened and edematous and inflamed, and they are loaded with the AGE damage. So again, eating cooked meats and lots of sugars, not very gentle with your brain if you want to maintain good mental function in your advanced years. So I'm focused on this so far to point out that you can do great damage to the body by producing AGEs and oxidized vegetable oils with plant-based foods. These are processed junk foods, if you will, but whether it's the fries or the sugars and the salty and the chips, etc., they can do great damage to the body, even though they're all, quote, plant-based, but of course they are highly processed plant-based food that takes them out of the healthy plant-based category when humans alter their structure so drastically. So I wanted to say that just being vegan does not assure you of healthy dietary practices by a long shot. That's why we use the term whole food plant-based. We want foods that you can grow, you identify growing in the garden. There's a cucumber, there's a tomato. Those are the kind of foods we're talking about. These may be plant-derived, but they are not healthy in this state. Now that I have made that obligatory acknowledgement, we do have to talk about that. Most people are not on a vegan diet. Most people in your society, my society, there's a piece of animal muscle at the center of the plate in most meals. If not, unless you are a Jane or an expressed vegan person who chooses those dietary patterns, you're going to be a piece of cooked animal muscle 2-3 times a day. And here is what that does to the bloodstream. Here's what enters the bloodstream after every meat-based meal. And in my country, if there's no meat on the plate, you call the weight person over and say, hey, where's my protein? So again, we eat a meat-based diet, and I think most people in Asian nations have that preference as well. So let's see what enters the bloodstream with every meat-based meal. First of all, no one is eating raw meat. The very act of grilling the burger, frying the chicken, broiling the beef oxidizes the cholesterol in the animal muscle. And as I will show you, it's the oxidized cholesterol particles that are the most atherogenic when they get into the artery wall. When you cook the animal muscle at high temperature, you're going to oxidize nucleic acids and carbohydrates that produce a fleet of reactive aldehydes, glyoxyl, acrolein, and these are mutagenic. They damage the genes that call forth the enzymes in our cells, and every meat-based meal floods your tissues and your chromosomes with mutagenic aldehydes. Why do we do that? You know, a tomato doesn't do that. Vegetable soup doesn't do that, but a meat-based meal does. New-5-GC is a sialic acid that only animals make, and it sets off inflammatory reactions throughout the body, and meat-based eaters are giving themselves a jolt of New-5-GC with every meal. And then there's endotoxin from the slaughterhouse bacteria. Anyone who's spent time working in intensive care unit is very well familiar with endotoxic shock and how lethal that molecule can be. Where does it come from? So I said it comes from the slaughterhouse. All animals pass through the slaughterhouse, even organic grass-fed beef. And as the digestive system is eviscerated, there's inevitable spillage of the gut contents. And you can take a culture tube and swipe any cutting surface in the meatpacking plant in the slaughterhouse, and you're guaranteed to get a luxurious growth of E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella, Enterococcus, Clostridia, Pseudomonas. Every steak and chop and chicken breast that leaves the meatpacking plant has a covering of these enteric bacteria on the surface. It is then sent to the the meat case at the supermarket where the ultraviolet light shines down and kills the bacteria. But as these bacteria die, their cell walls lyse and break apart, and that releases this powerful, potent lipid polysaccharide called endotoxin. Nasty stuff, endotoxin. Just take a walk around this daisy of distress and see what endotoxin does. It depresses heart function, releases histamine, releases tumor necrosis factor, makes your blood clot. Nasty stuff, endotoxin. And it's heat stable. The grilling the burger or frying the chicken does not get rid of the endotoxin. And again, people who are eating a meat-based diet are giving themselves a shot of endotoxin 2-3 times a day. And endotoxin makes the gut leaky. It increases intestinal permeability that allows food proteins and bacterial cell walls to enter the bloodstream where they have no business getting into, flowing through joint membranes, immune tissues, setting off inflammatory reactions throughout the body. And again, steaming corn or eating a raw salad does not produce this effect. Then there's TMAO, trimethylamine oxide. What is that? That comes from a meat-based diet. The food we eat determines the microbes that live in our gut. If a person is eating meat and eggs, then they're eating lots of carnitine and choline, and that's going to summon up microbes like Peptostreptococci and Clostridia that love metabolizing carnitine and choline. And they don't care about you. They're just waiting for that next piece of chicken to come down, and they will turn the carnitine and choline into trimethylamine, which your liver will oxidize into trimethylamine oxide. This is a toxic molecule. It drives cholesterol into the artery walls, prevents HDL from removing it, and sets off inflammation throughout the body. And we find that the folks that are eating in the paleo style, like they think the caveman used to eat, but they really, not even the caveman ate meat 3 times a day. But folks who eat that, are they walking around with high levels of TMAO? They sure are. And this puts them at risk for major adverse cardiac events and all-cause mortality. We are not carnivorous apes, no matter what the pro-keto folks try to tell us. We are plant-eating hominids, and we violate that natural principle at our own risk. Very active cooking animal muscle inevitably creates carcinogenic heterocyclic amines that smear on the gastric wall and setting off stomach cancer, smears on the colon wall, setting off colon cancers. The meat eaters have far more GI malignancies than the plant eaters do. When one eats a piece of meat and all those amino acids flood up into the liver responds by putting out a surge of insulin-like growth factor 1, one of the most powerful growth promoting hormones in the body. Fine, if you're a growing child, you want lots of IGF-1 in your body. But if you are an adult woman with an early breast cancer, or you're an adult man with a big prostate and some malignant cells in that gland, the last thing you want is a diet that makes you walk around with high levels of IGF-1, but that's exactly what a meat-based diet does. The heme iron that makes red meat red increases the risk of strokes and cancer. Don't have time to go into the mechanism. And less so in your country, but certainly in the States and around the world, animals are fattened in feedlots, and the grains they are fed often are laced with pesticides and herbicides. They drink water with cadmium, mercury, lead, and that accumulates in the animal's muscles. And so biting into that chicken or that burger delivers the concentrated load of these molecules that have accumulated in the animal's muscle. This is what flows through the bloodstream after every meat-based meal. I call it the postprandial red tide. And these are just some of the toxic molecules in that red tide that flow through every cell in our body for hours, meal after meal, day after day, on a meat-based diet. It's a fatty tide, it's a salty tide, it's a sugary tide, it's antigenic, it's full of phosphates, sulfates, that form acids that the kidneys and bones have to deal with. As I mentioned, it's mutagenic, damages genes, it's carcinogenic, certainly atherogenic, sets off inflammatory reactions throughout the body, and disrupts enzyme systems throughout the body. This is the red tide that people flood through their tissues and do it repeatedly. If one eats 3 meals a day, over 365 days a year, that's over 1,000 times a year. You're flooding the red tide through the tissues. And we know well now that within minutes of eating anything, molecules of that food are flowing through every cell in our body, where our DNA lies unfolded and our genes are exposed. And the food molecules wash over our DNA and they play our DNA like a piano. And they turn genes on, they turn genes off. They induce enzymes, they shut enzymes down. Every meal changes us on a genetic molecular level. Food brings in not only nutrients, it brings in information. And you don't need to be a geneticist to understand that the genes that are going to be turned on by this piece of broiled meat with all these meat-based contaminants are going to be a totally different set of genes that are going to be stimulated by this green salad that bathes the tissues with antioxidants and phytonutrients that quench free radicals, that promote tissue repair, that promotes membrane stabilization. It's the difference between 1 and 0, an animal-based diet and a plant-based diet. The difference is so profound. In one sentence, your genes may load the gun, but your diet and your lifestyle pull the trigger. You may have a genetic propensity towards a given disease, but whether it actually manifests in one's body largely, not completely, but largely depends on the food you're flowing through those tissues meal after meal. Here's a graphic illustration of the effect of foods on our genes. This left-hand panel is the genetic readout of a man with early stage prostate cancer. And all these red dashes here, these are active oncogenes promoting growth of the cancerous cells. This man went on a whole food plant-based diet, just day after day of salads and soups and steamed veggies and chilies and curries for 6 solid months. They then did another biopsy, same man, same prostate, same genes. And look at how many of these red active oncogenes have now been silenced. This is the power that food has to change us epigenetically. How can we withhold this information from our patients? We need to empower them with this understanding. Every meal makes a difference. Your body's never not looking. Food changes us in one of 2 ways, either epigenetically by like new 5GC turns on inflammation, but also the food we eat changes the microbes in our gut and they change us by the neurotransmitters and other products that they release. So in the clinic, when we open the door to the exam room and we see the man with the chest pain, we see the woman with asthma inhaling the bronchodilators, the woman with type 2 diabetes giving herself insulin, the woman grieving over her acne starred skin. The textbooks and professors often say, oh, we don't understand, etiology unknown. Really? Are we not largely looking at the effects of repeated red tides over time, month after month, year after year? Food effects over time equal the health effects. So let's talk specifically about these 3 diseases. I know time is getting on. We've lost some with that lengthy introduction and our technical glitch there, but let me keep sharing these 2 very important disease reversing mechanisms with you. Now, the issue is, why does it work? Well, how is the improvements produced and maintained? Well, first of all, here we are, the person's still eating the standard diet full of meats and dairy and oil and sugars and salt, and meal after meal, the red tide is washing through their cells, causing all of this molecular and enzymatic disruption. As soon as the person says, I can't do this anymore. I'm done with it. I'm tired of being obese and inflamed and diabetic and clogged up. What do I need to do, doctor? And he said, well, let's get you on a diet based of whole plant foods. And I showed you the example, and I'm sure there's an Asian version with lots of fresh, healthy whole plant foods. As soon as they make that change, and they go from the animal-based diet, full of especially all fried and overly processed foods, To a diet based on whole plant foods, what happens? Well, most dramatically, first of all, these continued floods of molecular marauders, they stop. There's respite. The red tide is over, and the body now has a chance to heal. Every cell, every tissue has self-repair mechanisms that can help reverse tissue damage, but they can't be active if the red tide marauders are constantly washing through the cell every 4 hours. But once that stops, tissue repair can happen. And look at the mechanisms that happen when this change occurs. Instead of those red tide meat-based marauding molecules, here's what is now washing through the bloodstream. Every meal is filled with, first of all, it's a high water content diet. All the soups and salads and steamed veggies and fruits are full of water. And so there's a surge of water through the body, through the tissues, through the cells with every whole plant-based meal. It's like taking your cells to the car wash and just flushes out and reduces the concentration of many intracellular destabilizing molecules. But that flush of water brings in a flood of antioxidants that bathe the tissues with molecules that promote tissue repair. Now, as the water content in the blood increases, the blood becomes less viscous. The saturated meat fats make the red cells sticky, and blood viscosity goes up. The physical chemistry of the blood plasma changes. Well, on a plant-based diet, the blood viscosity goes down. It's more free-flowing blood. And so there's a surge of blood flow through the capillary beds, increasing oxygen delivery and nutrient delivery throughout the tissues. And that works very well because all the dark green leafy vegetables increase the production of nitric oxide in the artery walls. And that's going to produce a subtle vasodilation, which helps lower blood pressure, but also, due to Poiseuille's law that I'll show you in a few minutes, a little dilation of the arteries means a big increase in blood flow. So you get this surge of oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich blood flowing through the tissues throughout the body. When you pull out the animal fats in the diet, you're pulling out the arachidonic acid, which is the main driver of prostaglandin 2 production, which drives inflammation throughout the body. You're pulling out almost all the arachidonic acid in the diet. And now all the fats are derived from plant oils, many of which are in the omega-3 family, and they have an anti-inflammatory effect. So you've changed the inflammatory balance in all the tissues of the body, and the brain, and the muscles, and the connective tissue, and the kidneys and livers. Such a profound difference. And because all these colorful fruits and vegetables are filled with antioxidants that quench free radicals, the reactive oxygen species of free radicals, the free radicals are quenched, and that lowers oxidative stress throughout the body. As you change the nature of the food stream, you're going to change the nature of the bacteria that make up our microbiome in the intestine. When one eats a meat-based diet, one is fostering the growth of pathogenic microbes, like in the Bacteroidetes phyla. Well, when you pull out the meat, and now the salads and the soups and the fruits and the grains are feeding a different set of microbes, and that's going to promote the growth of Prevotella microbes and other beneficial microbes that are less pathogenic, less pro-inflammatory, less pro-carcinogenic. So that's going to change. And as an additional benefit, the Prevotella microbes put out molecules that are neurotransmitters. They put out dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin that gets into our brain and often makes us feel better. People say, gee, I feel better since I went plant-based. I'm happier. That's not a placebo effect. That's a gift of the GI microbes that are now thriving in the plant-based milieu in the gut. When you stop eating the fats and cholesterol of other animals, your own lipid panel is going to improve and be less atherogenic. We'll talk about that. Our skin oils are made of the fats in our diet, and as the plant oils work their way out into the skin, people notice their skin conditions, the acne, the psoriasis often change, and their body odor often gets much less aromatic. The dairy cows are all pregnant now. And as a result, many dairy products are filled with estrogens, they're full of growth factors. Well, you pull those out and there's less likely a chance of breast lumps and prostate cancers. High protein diets are not friendly to the kidneys. When all those amino acids from the meat hit the glomeruli, it induces a state of hyperfiltration that over time will lead to kidney damage. Well, that is relieved on a plant-based diet. Respiratory secretions in the lungs get less viscous, people wheeze less. Red white blood cell counts go down, but yet there's no increased risk of infection. Why? Because the plant eater is not preying their bone marrow with endotoxin 3 times a day. So white blood cells go down to a count of 3,000, 2,800, but it's a good thing. It's a sign of just less inflammation. So in a word, when we say, well, what changes when a person goes from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet? In a word, everything changes. You have changed the entire biochemistry and physiology of every tissue bed in the entire body. And that sets the stage for these remarkable improvements that we see. I could spend 3 lectures on talking about each one of these organs, how they benefit from a whole food plant-based diet alteration in their diet. Such a day of eating, especially the foods that emphasize the legumes, the lentils and beans and chickpeas, the dark greens, the grains, the wheat and rice products easily provide enough energy and enough protein to keep all adult human beings well nourished. So let's talk about these 3 conditions. I know time is getting on here, but how does the plant-based diet reverse atherosclerotic plaques, diabetes, and obesity? Well, let's talk about disease reversal and cardiology. Gorillas in the wild do not generally develop atherosclerosis. They don't get myocardial infarctions and strokes. They die of trauma, infections, and parasites, but they don't get these diseases of civilization. And so the lesson that we to gain here is that we all focus on your LDL levels and statin treatment, et cetera, but atherosclerotic plaque formation is not just a matter of that their LDL is too high. The formation of atherosclerotic plaques is an inflammatory process that's actively being fostered with every red tide lace meal. These artery walls are being injured every 4 hours, meal after meal. First, the endothelial linings, that one cell thin, remarkable membrane that produces nitric oxide, that gets injured. Here it is in its native pristine state. But then along comes the meat-based diet with the grilled meats and the fried foods. And so the oxidized animal muscle, animal fats filled with free radicals and advanced glycation end products start damaging the endothelial lining. If you like fried foods, the onion rings and the various fried delicacies that I showed you before, you're eating the fryer oil that is filled with free radicals and AGEs. When one eats meat, uric acid is produced, and uric acid will engage the AGE receptors and set off inflammation, as will too much refined fructose, not the fructose in fruits. But the refined fructose can also set off advanced glycation end products. The phosphoric acid in cola drinks that gives cola the bite on the tongue, that is also damaging to the endothelial lining. This is the red tide flowing through the artery walls, causing repeated damage to the endothelium. Now, when the endothelium is damaged, now oxidized cholesterol particles, and we'll talk to you about that, get into the bloodstream. The oxidized cholesterol particles, they get into the artery walls. And this, again, comes from the cooked meats. The oxidized cholesterol is phagocytized by the macrophages that are then, they are teeming with free radicals. They become foam cells that are filled with free radicals. And these are then incorporated into the inflammatory response, the atherosclerotic plaque is formed here. But it's the body, the artery walls response to these foam cells that are, as I say, cellular marauders filled with free radicals. radicals and high oxidative activity. Now, oxidized cholesterol. Cholesterol itself is not an evil molecule. Your liver makes it, so your adrenals can make steroids and your gonads can make sex hormones. But you take the cholesterol molecule and you put it under that's in the meat, you put it under the broiler or drop it into the frying oil, and you're going to rip electrons off, and you turn this cholesterol into cholesterol hydroperoxides. And these are the oxidized cholesterol particles that are so atherogenic. And cholesterol will oxidize just meat in the refrigerator or in the meat locker. That cholesterol is oxidizing. As I mentioned, putting it under a broiler or dropping it into a fryer oil is certainly going to oxidize cholesterol. And when you eat meat and drop it into your own stomach acid is going to oxidize cholesterol. So all this oxidized cholesterol is being foisted into the bloodstream. And it's a major source of oxidized lipoproteins in human serum. And again, anytime you cook animal muscle or even eggs, you're going to be winding up with oxidized cholesterol. And beef and pork are among the most oxidized cholesterol-laden molecules. And again, so here's those oxidized cholesterol molecules that the reaction to them in the artery wall results in the plaque formation. Now, most cardiologists say once this happens, it's relentlessly progressive. Everybody's going to need statins and stents and bypasses. And yes, that's what they see. And that's what you're going to see, doctor, if you don't talk to them about changing their diet to whole plant foods. That's what you're going to see. But the truth is, this is actually reversible. I wish someone had told me this in medical school. I wish someone was telling the medical students this, which is exactly what our Moving Medicine Forward program is trying to do. But that's for another talk here. But this is a reversible disease, contrary to popular belief. And Dr. Caldwell-Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic made it very clear. And if you're not familiar with this clinician and this landmark book on how to reverse heart disease, please get this book, read it, and share it with your patients. Dr. Esselstyn has published in Family Practice Journal, took 198 patients. Every one of them had severe advanced atherosclerotic disease. They all had stents and had infarctions. They had angina. These were all almost 200 patients with severely caked up, clogged up artery walls. Put them on a whole food plant-based diet with lots of green vegetables and followed them for 4 years. During this time, these almost 200 patients would expect to have at least 60 of these 200 in those 4 years would have had a major adverse cardiac event. And the reality is, in those 4 years, essentially none of them had any adverse effect, any adverse event. And those people who had angina, 9 out of 10 of them had their angina improved or resolved completely. Those folks in the study group who did not stay on the whole food plant-based diet, over half of them did experience a major adverse event. This is such a powerful finding, powerful study. How can we explain this? Dr. Esselstyn does 2 things in his program, and we all can take advantage of this. First of all, get these people on a diet of whole plant foods. Stop the red tide. Stop the onslaught of oxidized cholesterol. Stop it all, okay? And instead, bathe those artery walls with all those wonderful phytonutrients that promote tissue repair. So that's the first thing, a whole food plant-based diet. Stop the red tide. Then he has patients eat several times a day a fistful size of broccoli, kale, chard, some type of dark green leafy vegetable. Why does he do that? I will show you. Because here we are in the artery wall. Here's the oxidized cholesterol molecules that were being taken up and producing the foam cells, etc. But as soon as you stop the red tide and go on a whole food plant-based diet, first of all, there is respite for the artery walls, no longer has to deal with this barrage of oxidized cholesterol molecules. And by eating that helping of dark green leafy vegetable, it puts like a time-release capsule in the intestine. So there's a constant stream of antioxidants seeping into the bloodstream, hour after hour, day after day, week after week. And as time goes by, these antioxidants work their way into the artery walls. And if there is any free radical oxidative damage happening, the antioxidants neutralize the free radicals. And as a result, with no more free radicals to be neutralized, the foam cells lose their adhesion to the artery walls and they outmigrate. You can see it on the electron microscope. The foam cells actually leave the artery walls. And as a result, the atherosclerotic plaques get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the endothelial lining that has been damaged reestablishes itself, not by magic, but because the bone marrow is constantly putting out showers of stem cells that reupholster the artery walls like new paving stones. And as a result, you get dramatic improvements like this man, a 46-year-old surgeon actually with severe atherosclerotic disease. Here's his left anterior descending artery in his heart. This rat-eaten portions here, as you know, these are atherosclerotic plaques encroaching into the blood flow channel. This man went on Dr. Esselstyn's program month after month for 29 months, meal after meal of salads and soups and dark leafy greens. And the plaques eventually melted away. The inflammation was quelled. And as the plaques melted away, this artery turned into this artery. Same patient, same artery. Look at the reversibility of this lethal disease. How can we deny our patients the power of what their daily food choices can provide? Dr. Esselstyn also suggests a little bit of balsamic vinegar on the greens that increases nitric oxide production in artery walls, which will produce that subtle vasodilation, which then takes advantage of Poiseuille's law that tells us that the flow of blood through the artery will increase by the fourth power of the increase in the radius. So just a little increase in the diameter of the blood vessel means a big increase in blood flow, oxygen delivery, etc. So as a result of that, here is a myocardial perfusion scan. Red is good blood flow. You can see how choked off the blood flow here in this person is. But they went on a whole food plant-based diet, stopped the red tide. The plaques melted away just a little bit. The arteries dilate just a little bit. Poiseuille's law comes into effect. Blood flow increases, and this perfusion scan turns into this perfusion scan within 2 weeks. And that's why you get these dramatic improvements. Like this patient report from 1977, I saw this. 65-year-old man with severe angina, had to stop every 9 or 10 paces, went on a whole food plant-based diet. 6 months later, he's climbing mountains in the Lake Districts of the UK with no angina pain. Again, a little melting away of those plaques, a little vasodilation produces tremendous improvement in symptoms. And blood vessels throughout the body increase their blood flow, much to the delight of people at home, but retinas, kidneys, genitals, they all benefit from increased blood flow. I'm showing this to show you that there is now a growing literature corroborating these remarkable findings that we can all institute on behalf of our patients. This lecture is being recorded. Please come back to this slide and check out each one of these references. High blood pressure gets better, heart failure, kidney failure. We see GFR rates go up as people take the load off their kidneys. And the same with heart failure. It's easier for the heart to pump less viscous blood around and through slightly dilated blood vessels downstream. The doctor's forced to then acquire the skill of deprescribing. How do you get people off their statins and off their hypertension medications? And not only can you get them off these pills, you have to, and they will stand up and pass out on you. And so there's a way to stop beta blockers and ACE inhibitors, and this is a skill easy to learn. If anyone like to my 4-page handout that I give to all my new patients about weight loss and healthy eating, go to my website, drklaper.com, and click on answers and download the health supporting eating plan. You can see what I give to my patients, and you're welcome to share it. So again, cardiovascular disease is eminently reversible. So is type 2 diabetes. And the principle, when people hear diabetes, oh, sugar, too much sugar, high blood sugar levels, don't eat sugar. Yeah, don't eat sugar because of the AGEs, but that's not the primary problem in insulin resistance and in type 2 diabetes. The problem isn't the sugar, it's the fats. And it was shown back in 1927 by Jay Sweeney at Yale. He took medical students in his class, first-year med students, divided them up into two battalions there. And one of the groups, he put on a high carbohydrate diet to see what lots of carbohydrates, if that would make them diabetic. And so for 2 days, all these young men, they were all men back then, were allowed to eat were sugar, candy, pastries, white bread, baked potatoes, syrup, banana, rice, and oatmeal, a high carbohydrate diet. 48 hours of that, they did a glucose tolerance test. They gave them 100 grams of glucose and 2 hours later checked their blood sugar. And the vast majority of them were back down in normal range. After eating all that sugar, their pancreas said, yeah, no problem, we can handle that. It didn't injure us. But the other group of students, he put on a high-fat diet for 2 days. The only things they ate were olive oil, butter, mayonnaise with egg yolk, and 20% cream. And after 2 days of that diet, they did a glucose tolerance test, gave them 100 grams of glucose, and every one of these young men wound up with diabetic readings on their glucose tolerance test, with blood sugars well over 180, most of them. Now, they're healthy young men. They went back on a standard whole food diet, and they all reverted to normal. But this shows the effect of fat on insulin receptors. And it's the fats in the diet that causes insulin resistance, and that includes the oil and the dairy and the meat fats, etc. What happens is this: normally, when we eat something, which we eat an apple, the sugar winds up in the bloodstream. It's got to be moved into the cells to be metabolized. And so the pancreas senses the glucose in the blood, secretes some insulin, engages the insulin receptors, and that in turn activates 2 kinase enzymes, and they in turn activate the GLUT4 transport mechanism, which pulls glucose into the cell via the vesicle mechanism. That's how it's supposed to work. But if the person is eating a high-fat diet and all the chicken and meat and oils and dairy, etc., as the months go by, that fat accumulates into the muscle cells and the liver cells. It becomes intramyocellular lipid. This is not theoretical. Here is what it looks like under the microscope. And this is striated muscle, and this black material here, this is fat in the muscle cell. This is intramyocellular lipid that's interfering with insulin production or insulin function. This is under a light microscope. Here it is under the electron microscope. This is fat in the muscle cell that does not belong there, but that's what a high-fat diet does. And as a result, the fat gets oxidized in the mitochondria, releasing a lot of free radicals and ceramides that inhibit these 2 kinase enzymes. So insulin knocks on the door, but nobody answers. The insulin receptors do not respond, and so the glucose piles up in the bloodstream. People say, "Oh, sugar, sugar," but the high sugar in the bloodstream, that's the tail of the dog. That's not the primary problem. That's the fats. That's the primary problem. It's the free fatty acids that are the problem. The high sugar is the result. And if you want to research this, just do some searches on intramyocellular lipid insulin resistance. You'll see there's going to be a growing literature. Now, if the person is obese, that adds another layer to the insulin resistance problem, because the visceral fat in the abdomen is metabolically active. Visceral fat puts out inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and these are flowing through the tissues, and they set off inflammation throughout the body called metabolic inflammation. Obesity is not a state of health, it's a state of inflammation, and it affects insulin receptors as well. And again, you're welcome to research this about obesity-related inflammation and insulin resistance. But here it is schematically. Here we are back in the muscle cell. It's all loaded up with intramyocellular lipid. Here is that lipid interfering with the insulin receptors on the inside of the cell. But here comes those inflammatory cytokines from the obese abdomen interfering with the insulin receptors on the outside of the cell. No wonder so many of our obese patients develop type 2 diabetes. The good news is this is totally preventable. You raise a child on a whole food plant-based diet, they will never develop insulin resistance or diabetes. They will never develop obesity. But carbohydrates are a clean burning fuel. They don't produce all the ketones and acidic byproducts that cause so many problems. And when one just stops eating the diabetogenic diet and goes to one based on whole plant foods, what happens? The body says, hey, where'd all the fats go? Well, we've got fats in the cell. Let's burn them. So the intramyocellular lipid on a whole food plant-based diet is metabolized. And so the insulin receptors open up on the inside. As the obesity melts away from the abdomen, the cellular cytokines that are interfering, they recede. And so the insulin receptors open up. And as a result, type 2 diabetes improves and often completely reverses. It's been shown by numerous studies. You're a person put on a whole food plant-based diet compared to the American Diabetic Association diet. The plant-based diet produced a greater drop in hemoglobin A1C. They lost more body weight. They had a better improvement in their lipids. They lost less protein in their urine. Again, it's ask any gorilla, it's the healthier diet we ought to be eating. And all of us who practice plant-based medicine have patients like Jim here, that was 100 pounds overweight on 30 units of insulin, went whole food plant-based. 14 months later, he dropped 100 pounds and now he's running marathons. This is not an unusual finding. This is the expected result. And again, you learn how to deprescribe insulin and oral hypoglycemic medications. Again, come back to the study, come back to the slide. There's lots of studies validating the reversibility of type 2 diabetes on a whole food plant-based diet. And obesity normally naturally melts away by itself. Why? Because the diet based on whole plant foods, lots of salads and soups and steamed vegetables, it's mostly fiber and water is what you're filling your stomach up with. Yes, there's protein and nutrients, but the vast majority of the bulk by weight and volume is fiber and water. And it passes right through the body. It comes out in stool and urine. It doesn't stick to you, doesn't produce obesity. I mean, how many apples can you eat? How much broccoli can you eat? And you fill your stomach up with that, you reach satiety without taking in a lot of excess calories. And so you don't need special weight loss programs or Ozempic. Get these people on a diet of whole plant foods, and the obesity usually takes care of itself. If it doesn't, then the person's eating pastries and refined carbohydrates there. And again, studies validating weight loss. So I'm just going to quickly now do a quick literature survey showing so many other conditions improve inflammatory arthritis, including rheumatoid arthritis. Come back and see this slide. Patients with lupus and other autoimmune diseases often get dramatic improvements. And I urge you, if you have such patients, get the book by Dr. Brooke Goldner called Goodbye Autoimmune Disease. She's a physician that put her own lupus into remission with a whole food plant-based diet. I give it to all my patients with autoimmune diseases. Crohn's disease and colitis dramatically responds to whole food plant-based diets. Semi-vegetarian diets are remarkably effective in reducing the inflammation of Crohn's disease. The asthmatic folks wheeze less. Psoriasis and eczema improve well as the skin oils change. Now, yet most physicians, at least in my country and Western society, they totally ignore this. Man, just send them to the surgeon or to the internist for statins and stents, etc. And we ignore this very powerful healing modality, much to the dismay and distress of our patients. Why don't we change? What is the resistance? There's both professional and personal resistance. Why doesn't my doctor know anything about nutrition? We're not taught about it. You go through 4 years of med school in my country, no one is essentially never mentioned, except to talk about scurvy and beriberi, things that you very rarely see in practice. And nutrition is not respected as a hard science. I'm up in the operating room doing real medicine. But what are you doing up in the operating room, doctor? You're dealing with the infections and the infarctions and the amputations from what your patients are eating. Well, dealing with the nutrition-based diseases. And plus, the doctors are eating the same food themselves, so they're not going to be telling their patients not to eat it. And so at the clinic visit, their patients' diets never really mentioned, business as usual. and the failure to help the patient become plant-based misses the chance to reverse these diseases, to lower the risk of cancers, reverse diabetes, to get that weight off of them, lowers their food costs. Rice is cheaper than rice and beans are cheaper than meat and chicken, no doubt. So the monetary savings of the systems would be in the trillions, and the improvement in human health and the reduction of suffering of people and animals and the ecosystem, and that's another lecture, would be priceless. But yet we just ignore it. And when I talk to my colleagues about it, they say, listen, doc, I don't know. Yeah, talk to my patients about what they're eating. I don't know what to tell them. I don't get paid to do this counseling. I don't have time to do this counseling. Now, this is an American medical problem, but I suspect you all with these big patient loads are in a similar position. Well, the good news is I don't have time to do this counseling. You don't have to, doctor. There are trained professionals who will do this counseling for you. Just realize you've got a patient with diet-based disease who's sitting in front of you, overweight, hypertensive, diabetic, clogged up and inflamed from what they're eating. So get this person on nutritional in front of a nutritional counselor who knows how to help them become plant-based. You see them back in a month and see if they're not leaner and healthier. There are professionals in America. The plant-based dietitians are becoming more and more abundant and easy to find. But you may not have them in South Asia. But now what you do have, there's online nutrition counseling in Sri Lanka by dietitians. Now, this is a company I know nothing about. I just saw this on the internet, but I said, aha, even in Sri Lanka, you can get plant-based nutrition counseling. There really is no reason to deny this for our patients. I'm sure there's many other corporations and practitioners, but we need to pull the dietitian onto the patient care team. The dietetic consultation should not be an afterthought. The dietitian should be seen on the very first visit after you see the patient. I want you to see Ms. Singh down the road, down the office. She's the plant-based dietitian. She'll counsel you, she'll show you videos, she'll take you shopping, and you eat like she says, and you come back and see me in a month. Let's see if you're not doing better. This is the treatment model for the 21st century that we should be considering. There's pressure in my country, Congress is urging that medical schools provide nutrition education to physicians, and fortunately, there's now wonderful plant-based educational opportunities available free for the taking. I urge people to go to Plantrition University, go to .org. You can, and you'll find ample video content, webinars, events, lots of plant-based practitioners, plant-based courses. And again, lots of fact sheets and videos, and we'll really educate you on how to use plant-based nutrition as part of an active clinical practice. If you just go back to this sign on page here, you'll be able to go right to it. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine has a lovely course on food as medicine, just a 5.5-hour course, and you'll get a good foothold, foundation as far as using plant-based medicine in your practice. And again, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine that anyone can take advantage of, have lots of food as medicine courses available. No reason for us to remain unschooled in this important subject. The University of Winchester has a wonderful 6-week online course in plant-based nutrition. Go to their website and enroll and take this course. I took it and I learned a lot. I urge you to do it as well. So disease reversal is possible, and this is where healing begins. And I urge the medical students and residents, talk about this with your professors. It'll stimulate stimulate good discussion, and will educate your professors as well. So disease reversal. It's a thing. There's already an international journal of disease reversal and prevention. It's free. I urge you to subscribe to it. There's wonderful books now. There's now plant-based nutrition in clinical practice. Please get this book and read it and educate yourself. And Dr. Sarai Stancic, a professor of infectious diseases, overcame her multiple sclerosis with plant-based nutrition, has some great insights in her book as well. So A diet based on whole plant foods is arguably the most therapeutically potent healing modality that any physician is ever going to wield. We need to put this in the hands of our medical students, of our residents, our young professors. We can't play victim here. It's the food, it's the food, it's the food. So my plea to the practitioners, if your next patient is overweight, hypertensive, diabetic, inflamed, or clot valve sclerosis, yes, order the essential tests, etc. But ask them what they eat on most days. And it's full of flesh and sugars and oils and processed foods, etc. Refer them to the plant-based dietitian, get the counseling done, you see them back. And people do change. People say, oh, they don't change what they eat. They do change. Everyone now has some relative who had a stroke, a heart attack. They're far more motivated than they used to be. Not everybody, but that's beyond our control. But we at least owe them the information. So I'm at the end of the presentation. See, once you look behind the curtain, you can't pretend you don't know what's behind the curtain. And when I give this lecture to medical students across the country and around the world now, internationally, I reach a point in the presentation where I ask a provocative question. I say, knowing that most of these diseases are reversible most of the time with whole food diet and lifestyle practices, knowing that these diseases you're going to spend the majority of your career treating, that are reversible, I have to ask you, want to heal these patients, or you just want to manage their chronic disease? If you're just going to be a manager of their disease, you'll leave medicine. It's a dismal way to practice medicine. You want to heal these patients, then get real about why they're sitting in front of you, doctor. It's from what they're running through their bloodstream 3 times a day. So this has been a report from the front lines of medicine. I've been a primary care physician for 5 decades, and I'm shouting back to my colleagues coming behind me, it's the food. It's been the food all along. And take advantage of this powerful modality, because otherwise you're going to be like the blind man and the elephant. And the cardiologist sees the clogged arteries, and the physiatrist sees the inflammatory joint disease, the endocrinologist sees the type 2 diabetes, and they all think they're treating different diseases, but really it's the food their patients are eating, and get them on a whole food plant-based diet, and these diseases reverse. I'm the happiest doctor I know. My patients get healthier. And I share the news that the era of whole food plant-based nutrition is dawning, and the plant-based wave is breaking. Line up your surfboard, learn about this, and you can become the happiest doctor you know, taking advantage of disease reversal through plant-based nutrition. So I know I covered a lot of material. I hope this has been beneficial, and I'll be certainly open to questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. What a wonderful talk that is. And thank you so much for taking some questions. I would like to invite Dr. Harris Patirage. Doctor, do you have any questions for Dr. Klaper? You have to unmute, Dr. Patirage.
I only have a few minutes here, but I can take some.
You want to take 1 or 2 questions, Doctor? Or yeah, I know Dr. Klaper actually has another lecture immediately after this, and he's a very, very busy person. Maybe we can take 1 question. Is that okay, Dr. Klaper?
Yes, I can do 1 question.
Okay, Dr. Patirage, do you have anything to ask? You have to unmute first. 1 minute.
Could you write it in the chat, and then I can follow up with Dr. Klaper so he can move on to his next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a popular belief that, especially in relation to the children, that for their growth of the muscles and the body and the brain, you need to give animal-based diet more, especially in their growing period. Now, is it true, or is there any alternative? Whether plant-based diet can supplement this, or is an alternative to give adequate protein as well as the lipids? Now, as you know, for the brain growth, you need a lot of cholesterol and sphingomyelins or the lipid-based diet, whether it's supplemented with the animal-based diet. And for the muscles also, you need a lot of proteins. So can we change or shift to a plant-based diet and get this protein and the fat for the proper growth of the children's, especially in relation to the brain as well as the muscles and the body?
From what I understand from the question, are you going to get enough protein and other nutrients from the plant-based diet? Well, the animals give us the answer. The biggest, most powerful animals on the planet, elephants and buffaloes and giraffes and gorillas, grow to thousands of pounds of mammalian muscle without ever eating chickens or beef. These are vegetarian animals, and clearly the amino acids are in the beans and the lentils and the chickpeas and the nuts and the seeds and the whole grains. There's plenty of protein around. And now with all these magnificent plant-based athletes doing these remarkable feats of strength, if you haven't seen a film called The Game Changers, see that film. You'll see these power lifters and runners and tennis players and cyclists perform these magnificent athletic feats on a completely plant-based diet. So the answer is yes, relax. There's plenty of protein and nutrients available in plant foods. If you want to, you don't have to be 100% plant-based. If you want to eat meat a little bit once a week, okay, I'm not going to appear in a puff of smoke and waggle my finger at you there. But to be eating animal flesh 2-3 times a day is not healthy for us plant-eating hominids. So the more whole plant foods in your diet, the healthier you're going to be. I have another lecture at the Robert Johnson School of Medicine coming up in a few minutes here that I need to attend to. I want to thank everybody for their attention. I hope this has been a benefit. Please replay this at your own leisure and check out the various references and feel good about prescribing and recommending a whole food plant-based diet to your patients. You will save their lives, and incidentally, you'll save the lives of a lot of animals, and most importantly, you'll save this planet, because we need to let the trees come back and take carbon dioxide out of the air, and that's what happens when we stop eating meat. It'll free up the land to let the earth stabilize its atmosphere. So it's really, really important. This is not just about arteries opening. This is about stabilizing the planet. So plant-based is our way to our future. Thank you, everybody. Blessings of health and happiness on all your important work. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. I know you have another lecture. So we'll let you go. And thank you so much. And we'll catch you again.
Thank you. Hope so. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And yeah, so we are not finishing as of now. We are continuing. So we have some wonderful doctors. If anyone has some questions, we can give them to the doctors. Maybe we can have a discussion. Actually, we can do it in Sinhala or English, whatever, depending on the question. So we have here Dr. Dahanayaka. Is that Dr. Kumudu Dahanayaka? Let me.
Mr. Ananda?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right. Actually, I wanted to ask this very simple question. I don't know whether you have come across any significant difference between chemically produced and organically produced plant-based food as far as the benefits are concerned.
Okay, so basically this whole foods plant-based diet. So they always recommend whole foods. I think the question you're asking is the the burgers, the plant-based burgers and all that, right?
No. I just want to know whether there any significant difference between chemically produced plant-based food and organically produced plant-based foods.
I see. Okay. Dr. Kumudu Dahanayaka, do you want to answer that question? Let me see whether Dr. Kumudu Dahanayaka.
I'm the one who asked the question.
Oh, you're Dr. Kumudu Dahanayaka. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So we'll get this question to Dr. Klaper. I think Jacqueline is writing them down, and we can get some actually answers later on. We can share it. In the same time, I'm actually opening the session to the people. If they have any question to ask from Dr. Kumdu Dahanayaka, Dr. Haris Patirage, or Dr. Sujiva Vikramasinghe, or Dr. Vasan Ratnasingham. So they are on this platform. Probably they can answer if you have any questions, the other audience members.
Mr. Ananda, second question. The other thing is the Dr. Klaper clearly mentioned that stressful life is a cause of disease.
Right.
And so if the meditation or the mindfulness does have any effect on the have you had any proven effects of mindfulness and meditation on good health?
Big time. Actually, frankly speaking, these doctors, I know Dr. Michael Klaper, and they are doing their meditation. They are mentally very sound and very strong. Maybe Jacqueline can answer that question, because Jacqueline is actually Dr. Michael Klaper's secretary. Jacqueline, you want to add something to that? But I know personally, lots of plant-based doctors, they are into nature, they are into environment, they are into body and mind training. They do all those things, and they do meditation. They do.
Yes, they do. And I'm his outreach director. So I think it would be great to get a full composition of everyone's question. If they could write it in the chat, and then I would have like an itemized list of the questions. Because, but yes, they are very practiced.
Whether the meditation.
They're very practiced meditators.
Overall health, yes.
Have both visited ashrams and stayed in ashrams before. I know that Dr. Klaper has treated lots of very practiced meditation teachers as part of the work he's done. I know that he was the doctor for Ram Dass.
Okay.
And he also, he himself and Elise, they are very practiced. Elise, his wife, is a practiced Vipassana practitioner.
Okay. Yeah, there are lots of doctors in the US. I know personally. They are into meditation, and they not only balance the body but the mind as well, with plant-based diet plus meditation and healthy and compassionate lifestyle. I mean, all these doctors. I know Dr. Klaper and Dr. Neil Bernard, and our next lecturer most likely will be Dr. Neil Bernard. I'm sure most of you have heard. So they are all into this kind of lifestyle practices. Yeah. Jackie, there are some questions coming on the chat. Maybe you can write them down.
So how we could best do this is if everyone just writes their questions in the chat, and then you can give me the list of the chat questions.
Okay, we can do that. All right. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question in Sinhala? Because there were lots of requests to have it in Sinhala and Sinhala translation, in the native Sri Lankan language. If anyone wants to, please raise your hand. There is on your Zoom screen, there's a reaction button. Then we can let you speak up. Renuka Nagodavitana. Okay, let me unmute you. And
hi, yeah, I heard about this factory produce meat because we had to give some replacement when you advise people to opt for a plant-based diet, because some people are used to eat meat and you can't just sudden adapt. So if what about this? I heard about this factory produced meat. Is it fully plant-based or some people say there is a clone taken from animals. Is it? I don't know whether it is fully plant based. Or do you recommend that? First question is: do you recommend that for a healthy, as a healthy diet?
As far as I know, basically, now we have plant burgers. Now you're talking about the lab-grown meat. It's a new concept, and are being produced these are being produced in the United States now, and the FDA has given the approval. USDA has given the approval, and also in Israel and in Singapore, I have seen. So it gets all the, I think it gets all the protein and other things, the taste and everything, but it is out of plant, out of an animal cell. So I think it has all what is needed, but I don't know whether there are any side effects and things like that, because these are just coming up, that concept. We'll see in the future. I think we can get that question to Dr. Klaper also, or any other doctor wants to answer that question, Dr. Dahanayaka or Dr. Harispatrige, please feel free. But I think it is a very, very new concept, but it's a reality now. These are right now very expensive, so people basically can't afford, but it is going to be very soon available to supermarkets and stuff. So as far as the quality is concerned, we still don't know how good that would be for your physical overall health. Nihal, let me unmute you. Nihal, can you unmute yourself? There's one gentleman called Nihal, and is trying to ask a question. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. දැන් මේ සමහර ප්‍රෝටීන් ಜಾති තියෙනවානේ B12 වගේ ඒවා මේ plant based protein වලින් එනවද කියලා දැනගන්න කැමතියි. ඒවා කොහොමද අපි plant based වලින් ගන්න කියලා. දැන් මේ B12 වෙන්නේ සමහර මත්ස්‍ය මේ කියන්නේ animal protein වගේ ඒවා එන්නේ B12 එන්නේ animal protein වලින් කියලානේ කියන්නේ. දැන් අපි කොහොමද B12 plant based වලින් ගන්න කියලා දැනගන්න කැමතියි.
මම කියන්නම් පොඩ්ඩක් මම දන්න ටික B12 ගැන. B12 කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම පස් වල තියෙන බැක්ටීරියා එකක්. එතකොට සත්තු ඔය උලා කන සත්තුන්ගේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ ඇත්තටම ඒ කෑම තුලින් තමයි B12 ඇඟට යන්නේ. ඇඟේ හදන දෙයක් නෙමෙයි මම දන්න තරමින්. අපර මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ නැවත දාන්න පුළුවන් ડોક્ટર ක්ලැපර්ටත්. එතකොට මම කියන්නේ මේ එතකොට හැබැයි B12 plant based වලින්ම ගන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. ඉතින් දැන් සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම vegan කෙනෙක් මේ සමහරක් ડોක්ටර්ස්ලා රෙකමන්ඩ් කරනවා B12 supplement එක ගන්නයි කියලා. මොකද B12 හුඟක් කරලාට මේ පැලෑටි වල කොළ වල තමයි තියෙන්නේ පස් ආශ්‍රිතව. ඒක හුඟක් කරලාට හේදුවාම ඒ B12 එක නැති වෙලා යනවා. මොකද පිටනේ තියෙන්නේ, කොළේ පිට හුඟක් කරලාට තියෙන්නේ. නමුත් සත්තු මේ කොළ උලා කන හන්ද හොදන්නේ නැතුව ඒ B12 ඇඟට ගිහලා ඒ සත්ව මස් හරහා B12 අපට එනවා. ඒක තමයි ඔය කියන ප්‍රධානම වෙනස මස් කෑම තුලින් අපට අඩු වෙනවා කියලා කියන දේ. නමුත් මම හිතන්නේ ડોક્ટર කුමුද් දහනයක දන්නවා ඇති මේ හාල් වල මේ අපි ගන්නවා නම් කුරුට්ටේ නියුඩ්ඩේ අර අපි හාල් පොලිෂ් කරන්නේ නැතුව කනවා නම් ඒ වගේ දේවල් වල ගොඩක් B12 තියෙනවා කියලා අහලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් කෙනෙකුට යම්කිසි බයක් සැකක් තියෙනවා නම් B12 සප්ලිමන්ට් එක ගන්න එක වටිනවා. ડોક્ટર කුමුද් දහනායක හරි ડોક્ટર හරිස්පත්‍රගේට හරි ගැන යමක් කියන්න පුළුවන්ද?
ඇත්තම මේ මිස්ටර් නිහාල්ලා ප්‍රශ්නෙට අපි දන්නවා මේ හරියට ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ෆුඩ් කල්චර් එකේ තියෙනවා forage varieties කැඳ වර්ග. ඒ කැඳ වර්ග හරියට traditional rice cereal based හරියට කැඳ එක හදන්න පුළුවන් නම් පාරම්පරික සහල් සහ ධාන්‍ය වලින් නිවැරදි තාක්ෂණයට කැඳ එක හදන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒ කැඳවල විටමින් B12 තිබිලා තියෙනවා. ඒක අපි රිසර්ච් වලත් අපි අත්දැක්කා. ඉතිහාසෙත් එහෙමයි. ඒ වගේම දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් දැන් හරකා කියන සතා මස් නොකා එයා B12 හදා ගන්න ඕනේ නේද?
ඔව්.
ඒතර ඒ වගේ අපි අපිට දැන් human food pattern එකේ අපිට පුළුවන් මේ B12 හදා ගන්න පුළුවන් විදිහට අපේ විශේෂයෙන්ම පාරම්පරික සහල් ආශ්‍රිතව ගන්න කැද වර්ග වලින් මේ B12 හදා ගන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් මම හිතන්නේ ડોક્ટર සුජීවා ඉන්නවා නම් මේක තව ටිකක් නියුට්‍රිෂන් පැත්තෙන් විස්තර කරන්න.
ડોક્ટર සුජීවා ඉන්නවද? මට මේ ලිස්ට් එකේ ඉන්නවා මට බලමු පොඩ්ඩක් හොයාගන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා. පොඩ්ඩක් ඉන්න. ඔව් ડોક્ટર සුජීවා අන්මියුට් කරලා කතා කරන්න ડોક્ટર.
මම ડોક્ટર සුජීවා වික්‍රමසිංහ අපි මේ දැන් මගේ නියුට්‍රිෂන් ක්ලිනික් එකක් තමයි මම 2009 ඉඳන්ම කරන්නේ වෛද්‍යවරියක් වුණාට ආහාරය තමයි නිර්දේශ කරන්නේ ආහාර වර්ග වලින් අපිට ඔය ලෙඩ සුවපත් කරන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් ඔය ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන් එකේ දැක්කේවා මම අත්දකින්නවා මගේ රෝගීන්ගෙන් B12 කියන එක විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔය හරක් මස් වල තියෙනවායි කියලානේ ලංකාවේ අපිට වෛද්‍යවරු හරි උගන්වලා තියෙන. ඒ වුණාට අපි දැක්කා මේ පාරම්පරික සහල් ආශ්‍රිත කුළුබඩු පොල්කිරි එළවලු දාලා හදන මේ කැඳ හදලා ඉවරලා විද්‍යාත්මකව ඇනලයිස් කරනකොට B12 තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍ය මිලිටර් 200ක ප්‍රමාණයක් ගන්නකොට දරුවෙකුට අවශ්‍ය B12 විටමින් ප්‍රමාණය හම්බ වෙනවා. මේ ශාක දැන් මේ B12 ගන්න ඇත්තටම පෝෂණ අතින් ගත්තත් B12 අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම සත් ආහාර වලින්ම ගන්නවා කියලා නෑ. පැසීමකට ලක් වෙන ආහාර වලත් මේ B12 අඩංගු වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපිට බොහොම පහසුවෙන් මේ දේශීය සහල් ඔග භාවිතා කරලා හදන කැඳ වලින් පහසුවෙන් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් මේ වෙනකොට පැහැදිලිවම දේශනයේ සඳහන් කරා මේ මස් අනුභවයේ නිසා වෙන හානිය. එතකොට අපි B12 ගන්න කියලා මස් වලට යන්න තරම් අවධානමක් ගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. මොකද කැඳ කියන එක ගත්තොත් ඇත්තටම ඒක පාසලි ඩයිජෙස්ටර් එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ බාගෙට දිරෝප්පු එකක්. ඒ හින්දා ඕනෙම කෙනෙකුට පහසුවෙන් ශරීරයට උරාගෙන ඒ පෝෂණය ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක තමයි මේ දේශීය කැඳවල තියෙන විශේෂත්වය. ඒක දේශීය හාල් වලින් හදුවොත් තමයි ඒකේ නියම ගුණය එන්නේ. එතෙන්දිත් ඇත්තටම දේශීය සහල් කියන්නේ ලංකාවේ පරිසරයට අනුව කාලයක් තිස්සේ හැදුණු ශාක වලින් එන ප්‍රතිඵලයක්. ඒක දැන් වැඩි දියුණු කරන්න ගිහිල්ලා වර්තමානයේ ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන සහල් එක්ක මේ ගුණේ දකින්න නැහැ. ඒ වගේම අපි මේ දේශීය වෙදකම විශේෂයෙන්ම නිල වෙදකමදී අපි ආහාරය තමයි ඖෂධය විදියට ප්‍රධානවම නිර්දේශ කරන්නේ. එතෙන්දී අපි දැක්ක මේ කුළුබඩු අපිට කුළුබඩු විශාල සංඛ්‍යාවක් තියෙනවා. මේ කුළුබඩුත් එකතු කරලා පොල් කිරි එකතු කරලා දේශීය සහල් වලින් මේ අවශ්‍ය සියලුම පෝෂණය රෝගියෙකුට හෝ පැඩිහිටියෙකුට දරුවෙකුට ඕනෑම වයසක කෙනෙකුට දෙන්න පුළුවන්. B12 ඇත්තටම ගැටලුවක් නැහැ. ඒ වගේම තව අපිට කියන්නේ ඔය යකඩ සිංකුණතා එන්න පුළුවන් ශාකාහාර වලින් කියලා. ඒ වුණාට අපි දැක්කා මේ ශාකාහාර විතරක් ගත්තොත් ඒ වුණාට අපි සායනිකව දැක්කා මේ පලාකොළ දීලා කලවම් පලා දීලා අපිට හිමොග්ලොබින් ඒ කියන්නේ ලේවල යකඩ ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන් දවස් කිහිපයක් තුළ රෝගීන්ගේ වාර්තා එක්ක දැකපු දේවල්. ඒ වගේම මේ කැඳ දෙනකොටත් අපි දැක්ක සති දෙකක් විතර යනකොට හිමොග්ලොබින් වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන්. සාමාන්‍ය අපි බ්ලඩ් පයින්ට් එකක් දීලත් හිමොග්ලොබින් එකක් විතර තමයි වැඩි වෙන්නේ. ඒ වගේම මාසයක් අයන් ටැබ්ලට් දීලත් හිමොග්ලොබින් 1කින් විතර තමයි ලේවල වැඩි වෙන්නේ. අපිට ඒක පාරම්පරික සහල් ආශ්‍රිත කැඳ දීලා සති දෙකක් වගේ කාලයක් තුළ වැඩි කර ගන්න පුළුවන්. කලවම් පලා එකතු කරොත් දවස් කිහිපයක් තුළ වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ හින්දා මේ B12 විතරක් නෙමෙයි යකඩ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ සියල්ලම අපිට මේ plant based diet එකකින් ගන්න පුළුවන්.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි අත්‍තරම ડોક્ટર සුජීවා මේ ඉතාමත් වටිනා කතාවක්. අත්‍තරම දැන් ඔය සප්ලිමන්ට් ගැන කියනකොට මම මතකයි ડોક્ટર හැරිස් පත්‍රගේ මගෙන් කලින් ඇහුවා මේ plant based B12 supplements තියෙනවා. plant based vegan එහෙම නැත්නම් vegan B12 ගන්නත් තියෙනවා කඩිනුත්. මේ ඒ කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම මේ හැම වෙලාවෙම B12 original source එක plants. වලින් ඒ කියන්නේ plants හරහා එන දෙයක් තමයි. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒක මම දන්න තරමින් ඒක තියෙන්නේ මේ පස්වල තියෙන බැක්ටීරියාවක්. B12 කියලා කියන්නේ ඒක නමුත් අපේ ආහාර හරහා එනවා. ඉතින් අපි දැන් අර ගොඩාක් කෑම වර්ග උනත් මේ ડોક્ટર සුජීව අපි හොදලානේ කන්නේ දැන් අපි කොටුකොළ කෑවත් කොටුකොළ කඩාගත්තත් ඕගැනික් දෙයක් උනත් මේ වස විසරවම නිසා හොඳට හොදනවා. දැන් ඉතින් ඒ හේදීම නිසා මේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේ B12 අපිට ගන්න තියෙන ටිකත් අඩු වෙලා යන ගතියක් සමහරවිට කියනවා. ඒක නිසා මේ හොඳ ඕගැනික් plants අපි ගන්නවා නම් කොටුකොළ මුකුණු වෙන ලංකාවේ උතරන් තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේ ඒවා අපි තමන්ගේ ගෙවත්තේ වගා කරගන්න පුළුවන් ක්‍රමයක් තියෙනවා නම් දැන් මම උදාහරණයක් ඇටියට මම හැමදාම උදේට කරන දෙයක් මගේ මේ YouTube මම Facebook එකේ දාලා තියෙනවා. උදේට මගේ ගෙවත්තට ගියාම විශාල ගෙවත්තක් නැහැ. එතනදී නමුත් ඒකේ තියෙනවා කොටුකොළ මුකුණු වෙන්න ඔය කියන හැම දෙයක්ම මිංචි ඔය පේරකොළ වගේ දේවල්. ඉතින් මේවා හරහා මේ ඒ කොළ ටිකක් හදාගෙන පොඩි මේ බ්ලෙන්ඩර් එකකට දාලා ස්මූති එකක් නැත්නම් ජූස් එකක් වගේ හදාගෙන බිව්වහම අපට අවශ්‍ය ෆයිබර් ඔය කියන දේවල් ගොඩක් ලැබෙනවා. ඉතින් එහෙම ප්‍රැක්ටිස් එකකට මම හිතන්නේ අපේ කට්ටියට යොමු වෙන්න පුළුවන් නම් හොඳයි කියලා මේ වෙලාවේදී ආරාධනා කරනවා. තව මේ ආවල්දී පොඩ්ඩක් මම ආරාධනා කරන්න කැමතියි ડોક્ટર වාසන්ට පුළුවන් නම් අද මේ කරපු සාකච්ඡාව ගැන දෙමළ මාධ්‍යයෙන් යම් කිසි දෙයක් අපේ දෙමළ මේ සහෝදරයන්ට කියන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා පොඩි සමාලෝචනයක් වගේ එකක් අපිට පොඩි වෙලාවක් දෙන්න පුළුවන් ડોક્ટર වාසන්. ડોક્ટર වාසන් ඉන්නව නේද? වාසන් පෙන්නන්නේ නැහැ වගේ නේ. හරි ડોક્ટર වාසන් සම්බන්ධ වෙන කාලේ ડોક્ટર දහනායක මේ මම පොඩ්ඩක් කැමතියි ඔබතුමාට ආරාධනා කරන්න. දැන් ඔබතුමා ඉන්නවනේ මේ local food promotion and monitoring task force එකේ ලංකාවේ මේ විශේෂයෙන් මට පොඩ්ඩක් මේක ගැන යමක් සඳහන් කරන්න. මේකත් අපේ මේ මාතෘකාවටත් අදාළයි. මේ දේශීය ආහාර ප්‍රවර්ධනය කිරීමේ කාර්ය සාධන බලකාය නේද ඒකට කියන්නේ සිංහලෙන්. මේ ඒ සඳහා වෙන කාර්යයත් ඔබතුමා අනුගමනය කරන දේවලුත් සහ අපට අපේ ජනතාවට කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් මේක හරහා පොඩ්ඩක් මතක් කරන අවස්ථාව කරගන්න පුළුවන්ද මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ડોક્ટર දහනායක?
ඔව් මිස්ටර් ආනන්ද මම හිතන්නේ දැන් ශ්‍රී ලංකන් දැන් ඕනම කෙනෙක්ගේ ලෝකල් ෆුඩ් එක තමයි ජීවත් වෙන ඉපදිච්ච ලෝකැලිටි එක තමයි හොඳම ෆුඩ් සෝස් එක කියලා අපි හඳුන්වන්නේ. ඒක වෙස්ටර්න් නියුට්‍රිෂන් රිසර්ච් වල විතරක් නෙවෙයි ඈත අතීතේ ඉඳලම මිනිස්සු ජීවත් වෙන වටපිටාවේ තියෙන ආහාරය තමයි Tamanට තමගේ ජාන වලට ගැලපෙන්නේ කියන එක ඒක ඓතිහාසික විශ්වාසයක් විතරනේ ඒක පදනමක්. මම හිතන්නේ ඒක බිඳීම තමයි පහුගිය කාලේ අපිට වෙච්ච ප්‍රශ්නේ. ඉතින් දැන් ලංකාව ගත්තොත් local food source ඒ කියන්නේ තමන් ජීවත් වෙන ප්‍රාදේශීය වශයෙන් තියෙන ආහාර ගත්තොත් ලංකාවේ තියෙන වාර්තාගත දත් වලට අනුව 3600කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක් ශාකමය ආහාර වර්ග තියෙනවා. 3600කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක්. ඒ වගේම ඒ ආහාර වර්ග වලින් කෑම වර්ග 8000කට එහා පැත්තේ අපේ රටේ ඉතිහාසය හදලා තියෙනවා. ඒක තමගේ ජීවිත කාලය පුරාවට කාලිවර කරන්න බැරි කෑම ප්‍රමාණයක් ලංකාවේ මේ කියනවා මේ ඒ තරමට විවිධත්වයක්. ඉතින් නමුත් අවසනාවකට අද අපි පරිහරණය කරන්නේ අපේ රට විතරක් නෙවෙයි මුළු ලෝකෙම පරිහරණය කරන්නේ වැඩිපුර ආහාර 20ක් විතර. ඒකට විශාල වශයෙන් අපිට අඩු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේ ශාකමය ආහාර විවිධත්වය තමයි අපිට අඩු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. මොකද මිනිස්සු මස් මාංශ නම් විවිධ විදියට හොයාගෙන කනවා. නමුත් ශාකමය ආහාර තමයි තාමත් අඩු විවිධත්වයකින් අපි කන්නේ. ඇත්තටම ඒක තමයි ප්‍රධාන හේතුවක් විදිහට අපි දකින්නේ. ඉතින් ඒකෙන්ද මම විශේෂයෙන් පතු කරන්න කැමති ඔබතුමාගේ ඉල්ලීම විතර මේ තමන්ගේ local foods ඒ කියන්නේ තමන් ජීවත් වෙන ප්‍රදේශයට ආවේනික වූ ආහාර ටික අපි එකතු කරගත්තොත් ඒක ඉතා විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක්. පහුගිය සැරේ දැන් පහුගිය වෙසක් සතිය තුළ අපි දිස්ත්‍රික්ක 23ක මේ පින්කම් 26ක් මේ දේශීය ආහාර වලින් අපි කරා. ඉතින් අපි එතකොට දැක්කේ ලංකාවේ ඇත්තටම මිනිස්සුන්ට අපි කිව්වොත් දේශීය ආහාර හදන්න කියලා ඒ හදන්න පුළුවන් දේශීය ආහාර වර්ග ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. දැන් උදාහරණයක් වශයෙන් ගත්තොත් දැන් ડોક્ટર උත්පලා කියලා අපේ ආයුර්වේද ડોක්ටර් කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. එයා සමීක්ෂණයක් කරා කොළඹ මෙට්‍රොපොලිටන් ඒරියා එක නාගරික ප්‍රදේශයක ගත්තත් පලා වර්ග 50ක් තියෙනවා අපිට කන්න කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒකට මේ ටවුන් ඒරියා එකක් වෙලා. ඒකට ගමට ගියොත් කොච්චර තියනවද කියන එක අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් ඒකෙන්ද මට හිතෙනවා අපි මේ ප්ලාන්ට් බේස් ෆුඩ් එක ගත්තම මේ තමන්ගේ ලෝකැලිටි එකට අදාළව තියෙන ෆුඩ් එක තමයි තමන්ට ඉතාමත් ගැලපෙන්නේ. ඒක තමයි අපි දකින්නේ. ඉතින් ඒකෙන්ද මේ විශේෂයෙන් එක ගැන මතක් කරන්න කැමතියි. ඒ වගේම මේ ඒ පිළිබඳව විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ ආහාර රටාවට එකතු කර ගැනීම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපි ඉදිරි පියවරක් වශයෙන් මේ ප්‍රතිශාහ ප්‍රවාදන ජාතික වැඩසටහන විදිහට ඉදිරි කටන පින්කම් මාසය අපිට එනවා. ඒ නොවැම්බර් වල කටන පින්කම් වලදී අපිට පුළුවන් තරම් අපි ඉල්ලීම් කරනවා කටන පින්කම් දෙනවා නම් සහ ඒවා ඒ සමයේ අපේ සංඝයා වහන්සේලාට පූජා කරන්න, විශේෂයෙන් බුද්ධ පූජාව සංඝයා වහන්සේලා සාංගික දාණයට මෙන්න මේ දේශීය ආහාර පුළුවන් තරම් ගන්න වැඩපිළිවෙලක් ඒවා උයලා දාන වලට පූජා කරන්න පුළුවන් වැඩපිළිවෙලක් හදනවා නම් ඉතාමත් වැදගත්. මොකද ඒ වගේ තැනකින් තමයි මේක සමාජගත කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒ ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා. ඉතින් ඒ සඳහා අවශ්‍ය ගයිඩන්ස් එකත් අපිට දෙන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් අපි ගොඩාක් මේ වෙනකොට දේශීය ආහාර වර්ග ලංකාවේ තිබිච්ච පුණ භාවිත අතරම මේ ආහාර වල තියෙන වැදගත්කම තමයි අපේ දේශීය ආහාර වල අතරම මේකට පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕන රසායනික කෘෂි රසායනික විනාශක වර්ග ඉතාමත් අවමයි. අපිට නොගැලපෙන දේශීය නොවන ආහාර අපි අමාරුවෙන් වගා කරගන්න යාම තුළ තමයි මේ අධික ලෙස අපිට මේ කෘෂි රසායන වර්ග භාවිතා කරලා ඒවත් රෝගවලට හේතු වෙන. දැන් ડોક્ટર ක්ලැපර් පැහැදිලිව සඳහන් කරා මේ අර බයෝ ඇකියුමුලේෂන් එක සිද්ධ වෙනවා කියලා අර ශරීර තුළ pesticide residues and heavy metals. ඉතින් ඒවා අපි ආහාරයට ගන්නකොට ඒ වගේම plant based කියන්නේ ශාකමය ආහාරات මේ වගේ වස්විස සහිතව වගා කරද්දී ඒවා අපේ ශරීර වලට අන්තර්ගත වෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒකින්ද local plant based food pattern එකට යන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒක ඉතාමත් වැදගත් කියන එක විශේෂයෙන් මතක ගන්න. බොහොම ස්තුතියි අවස්ථාව දුන්නාට. ඒ වගේම මේ වෙලාවේ විශේෂයෙන් ස්තුතිය පළ කරනවා අපේ ආනන්ද මහින්කන්ද මහත්මයාට මේ දේශනය ලෑස්ති කරලා ඇත්තටම මේ පිළිබඳ සාකච්ඡා ගොඩනැගීම සම්බන්ධ.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි. ඇත්තටම ඔබතුමන්ලාගේ පිහිටෙන් ආධාරයෙන් තමයි ඉතින් මේ අපි අපිට යමක් කරන්න පුළුවන්කම තියෙන්නේ. මේ ඇත්තටම ඉතාමත්ම සන්තෝෂයි ලංකාවේ මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් කතා කරන වෛද්‍යවරු ඉන්දියම ගැන. දැන් ડોક્ટર හැරිස් පතිරගේ ડોક્ટર අනුරුද්ධ පාදිනිය ඔබතුමන්ලා ડોક્ટર සුජීවා වගේ තව මම දන්නවා ડોક્ટર අශෝක ජයසේන මෙතන ඉන්නවද දන්නේ මේ අවස්ථාවේදී. ඉතින් මේ වෛද්‍යවරුන්ට මම හිතන්නේ පුදුමාකාර ප්‍රෙෂර් එකක් පීඩනයක් තියෙනවා අනිත් කට්ටියකින් මේ නොදැනීම නිසා මේ ගැන කතා කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැතිකම. ඉතින් එතන අපි ඒක හොඳට දකිනවා. ඒක හැම ශාස්ත්‍රයකම මේ තත්ත්වය තියෙනවා. ප්ලාන්ට් බේස් ගැන කිව්වන් පස්සේ දැන් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් බෞද්ධ රටක් කියලා අපි කියනවා. ඊට පස්සේ මේ බෞද්ධකම තුලිනුත් මේකට පහර ගහන්න උත්සාහ කරන අවස්ථාවල් තියෙනවා. එතකොට දැන් වෛද්‍ය වෘත්තිකයන් හරහා වුණත් ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉගෙනගෙන තියෙන දේ දැන් අපි හුඟක් වෙලාවට වෛද්‍ය විද්‍යාලේ මේ ડોક્ટર ක්ලැපර් එතකොට ડોક્ટર නීල් බර්නාඩ් වගේ කට්ටිය කියන්නේ නියුට්‍රිෂන් කියන දේ ගැන වෛද්‍ය විද්‍යාලවල වැඩි ඉගෙනවෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන එක. හුඟක් වෙලාවට ඇමරිකාවේ නම් යුනිට් එකක් දෙකක් තමයි තියෙන්නේ අවුරුදු 6ක 7ක මේ ඒ සම්පූර්ණ අධ්‍යයන කාලය තුල. ඉතින් ඒක මදි. ඉතින් ඒක තමයි දැන් ඔය ડોક્ટર ක්ලැපර් එහෙම දැන් ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ සංවිධාන වලින් මුළු ඇමරිකන් රජයෙන් බල කරනවා විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවල වෛද්‍ය විද්‍යාලවල නියුට්‍රිෂන් නැත්නම් පෝෂණය ගැන උගන්වන්න කියන එක හරි විදිහට. ඉතින් ඒවා උගන්වන්න උනත් මේ දැන් USDA FDA වගේ ආයතන පව ඇමරිකාවේ ඒවට ප්‍රධාන මොනිටරින් ආයතන මේ ආහාර සහ ඖෂධ සම්බන්ධයෙන් මේවත් අධ්‍යක්ෂකවරු ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඒවට මුදල් සපයන්නේ මේ හුඟක් වෙලාවට ආධාර ලැබෙන්නේ මස් සහ කිරි සමාගම් වලින්. ඉතින් මේක ඉතාමත්ම බරපතල තත්ත්වයක්. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා මේව සමාජගත වෙන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් හුඟක් වෙලාවට ඒගොල්ලෝ මොනවා හරි රිසර්ච් එකක් කරලා හකලා ඒගොල්ලන්ට කැමති දෙයක් හොඳ දෙයක් පෙන්වන දෙයක් විතරක් එළියට දානවා. ඉතින් අන්න ඒ වගේ විශාල තත්ත්වයක් යටතේ තමයි අපි මේ කතාවල් කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ. ඉතින් කෙනෙකුට අහන්න පුළුවන් මගෙන් කතා කරලා මොකද්ද ඔයාලට තියෙන රුදාව මේවා ලංකාවේ කී ඉන්නේ කියලා එහෙම අහලත් තියෙනවා. ඇත්තටම අපි මේ හුඟක් කලාට මේ සමාහිත නේචර් ෆවුන්ඩේෂන් කියන එක හරහා ડોක්ටර් අපි මේ කරන්නේ මේ පුළුවන් තරම් අපි මේ යම්කිසි හොඳ ජීවිත පෙරදක් මේ ඇමරිකාවට ලක් කරනවා. නමුත් අපේ නිදහස් අධ්‍යාපනයෙන් ලබාගත්ත ඒ දැනුම ඒ අවස්ථාව නිසා තමයි අපි මෙහෙම ඉන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒකට අවශ්‍ය කළගුණ සැලකීමක් හැටියට සහ අපේ රටනේ ඉතින් මේ රටේ මිනිස්සු දැන් ලෙඩ අසනීපයි. සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ලෙඩ වෙච්ච රටක් ඇත්තටම අපි හොඳට අර ඔබ්සර්ව් කරන හන්ද අපිට පේනවා ඒක. ඉතින් මේ සූපත් කිරීමේ කාර්යයක් මේක ඉතාමත්ම සරලව මමත් අත්විඳලා තියෙනවා. අපේ තිබිච්ච ලෙඩ තත්ත්වයන් ශනිකව නැති වෙලා ගිය හැටි මේ ආහාරය වෙනස් කිරීම පමණකින්. ඉතින් ඒවා අත්දැකලා තමයි මේ කතාවල් අපි ඔක්කොම කියන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ. ඉතින් බොහොම ස්තුතියි ඔබතුමාට. අනිත් එක මේ දැන් ඉස්සරහට තව අපේ ලෙක්චර් සීරීස් එකක්ම අපි සංවිධානය කරලා තියෙනවා. තාම දිනේ හරියට කියන්න බෑ. හුඟක් වෙලාවට ડોක්ටර් මේ අපි ඔක්තෝබර් එන්ඩ් එහෙම නැත්නම් නොවැම්බර් මුල් සතිවල වගේ ડોક્ટર નીલ බර්නාඩ් කියලා කියන්නේ මේ ශාස්ත්‍රයේ ඉන්න දැවැන්තේ එතුමාගේ මම හිතන්නේ ડોક્ટર සුජීව හැම මට දකිව්වා ලංකාවේ උගන්වන්නේ තේ ડોક્ટર નીલ බර්නාඩ්ගේ පොත කියලා මේ පෝෂණය සම්බන්ධයෙන්. ඉතින් අපි එතුමන්ව සම්බන්ධ කරගන්න කතා කරගෙන තියෙන්නේ. දිනේ තමයි තාම තීරණය කරගන්නට ඕනේ. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ අපි මේ දැනුවත් කිරීම ලංකාවේ කරමු. මේ මිනිසුන්ව සුවපත් කිරීම සඳහා සහ සතුන්වත් පරිසරයත්. අපි දැන් මේ පරිසරයේ වෙන හානිය ගැන අපි දන්නේම නැහැ මේ මස් කෑම තුලින්. මේ මහා පුදුමාකාර හානියක් අපිට ඉන්න තියෙන මේ පොඩි ඉඩ ලෝකේ මුළු පෘථිවි තලයෙන්ම 3/2ක්ම වතුර තියෙන්නේ. 3/1යි මේ මිනිසුන් ඉන්න තියෙන්නේ. ඒකේ කාන්තාර සහ වනාන්තර ඒවරත් ඉඩ අවශ්‍යයි. ඉතින් බොහොම ටිකයි මිනිසුන් ඉන්න තියෙන්නේ. ඒවත් දැන් කාන්තාර බවට පත් වෙමින් යනවා මේ සත්තු පාලනය සඳහා කැලෑලි කිරීම ආදී දේවල් තුලින්. සහ පරිසර හානිය තුලින්. ඉතින් අපි ඒ ගැන ඉස්සරහට දැනුවත් වෙමු. මේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා ડોક્ટર රිම්සීනාගෙන්. ડોક્ટર රිම්සීනාගෙන් ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහනවා how can increase hemoglobin level in CKD patient who cannot take green leaves කියලා. ඒකට පැහැදිලි උත්තරයක් අපි ගාව තියෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපිට මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ දාන්න පුළුවන් ડોક્ટર ක්ලැපර්ට. අපිට පස්සේ ඒකට උත්තරයක් ලබා දෙන්න පුළුවන් රිම්සීනාට. Dr. Rimsina, Dr. You can Doctor. You can speak up. You can raise a hand. Dr. Rimsina. He seems to be not there. Right. We will put that question to Dr. Klaper. How can increase hemoglobin levels in CKD patients who cannot take green leaves? Dr. Sujiva කතා කරන්න.
CKD වුණාට එයාගේ පොටෑසියම් ලෙවල් රුධිරයේ තියෙන පොටෑසියම් ලෙවල් එක නෝමල් නම් අපිට ග්‍රීන් ලිව්ස් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. මේ පලා ජාති දෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ නැත්නම් අර අපි දැක්ක එක තමයි පාරම්පරික සහල් ආශ්‍රිත කැඳවලිනුත් හිමොග්ලොබින් වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් මම ගොඩක් වකුගඩු රෝගීන්ට ප්‍රතිකාර කරලා තියෙනවා. අපිට ඇත්තටම රෝගියාට මේගේ හිමොග්ලොබින් වකුගඩු ලෙඩුන්ගේ වැඩි කරලා තියෙනවා මේ plant based diet එකේ.
හොඳයි, බොහොම ස්තුතියි. Doctor, now I am not a medical doctor, but now අද අපේ මේ කතා කරපු දේවල් වලින් අපිට සාරාංශයක් හැටියට ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න පුළුවන් මොකක්ද අපේ සහෝදර ජනතාවට. මොකද මේක අපි රෙකෝඩ් කරලා YouTube එකට සම්බන්ධ කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන නිසා. දැන් පැය දෙකකට ආසන්න කාලයක් අපි ගත කරලා තියෙනවා. පොඩ්ඩක් question දෙකක් තියෙනවා. ඒක අරන් ඉමුද? Lilani also is a doctor, I think. Lilani Mutali neda me kata karanne.
Hari, yeah.
Ananda, Lilani neme is Deva.
Oh, Deva. Okay, Deva.
I got a question.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. Okay.
Comment. I have got lots of vegetarian friends. They are Indians of Jain. They are Jain. They are vegans for generations. My question is, why do they have the same amount of diabetes? Incidence of diabetes is so common among that population, also on the South Indian population, despite of their vegan or vegetarian diet for generations. Why, you said, has anybody got an answer for that?
I don't know. We'll have to see I mean, when you say lots of people,
Incidence
they,
of diabetes is not any less than the general population.
Mhm.
And the vegetarian.
Now, Indians basically they eat a lot of dairy products.
Yes.
Lots of dairy products. Actually, dairy, I think, to me personally, dairy is the killer. Dairy is the worst thing of all these things. For example, I recommend you to watch Dr. Neil Bernard. I can send you some videos. So even Dr. Klaper mentioned today, for diabetes, the thing is not sugar, it is the fat.
Fat, yes, I heard that. Yeah, I heard.
So and Indians, lots of fat in, they always cook things, and their meals are cooked on dairy cream, not coconut, like what we do in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
So dairy is a big thing in their diet. So when you say plant-based whole foods, so this completely plant-based. There couldn't be any, dairy. I mean, dairy is basically animal, and this dairy, or you call it milk, right? I think Mahinkanda milk killing. I think then milk is so dangerous, actually, because no one in the animal kingdom is drinking milk of another species.
That's right.
That's number one. Number two, even your own mother's milk, we drink only for the first few months, and after that we have to go to the solid food. And no animal in the animal kingdom drink milk after the infancy. So this milk mania is a big myth, actually. It is tasty, of course, and it has a molecule called casomorphine. Milk is very addictive. That's why we can't get out from that. And we don't have to take milk. Milk is very dangerous. And I suggest we listen to Dr. Neil Bernard on this topic. He has lots of videos about dairy. Diabetes. Yeah.
Does he talk about the Jains? The people who are Jains, they are totally vegans. They don't even take any dairy products. They are like to know. My friend who is a Jain, he's the one who told me that diabetes is so common among Jains. So that'll be another question to ask Dr. Klaper.
Yeah. So if he can actually, the good thing is to know what they eat also. If they, even for us to put that question forward, or to send it to the Dr. Klaper, if they can just give us some kind of a guideline, what we eat a day, during a day, something like that. So they will definitely look into it. And there may be other factors as well, but generally, it's very difficult for a complete vegan, not a vegan, plant-based, whole foods plant-based. That's the word. The vegan, now Dr. Klaper also mentioned, like, now vegan says we don't take any animal product, that's fine, but we can take sugar, like Coca-Cola is vegan, right?
Right.
So if we take Coca-Cola continuously, you get sugar also. So because that sugar can convert to fat again later on. So
beer is vegan too, you know that, right? Beer is vegan too.
Yeah.
Beer, drinking beer.
Yeah, drinking beer is vegan. So the right word is not veganism, but whole food plant-based.
Okay, thank you.
That's what we should pay attention to.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, Lilan, you have
other thing is
Dr. Dahanayaka, go ahead.
Yeah, thing is, we have a lot of foods which are adulterated or contaminated, some chemical residues, artificial chemical residues, and most of the foods are now being, although we are telling that they are whole or natural, but they are not natural because their genetic basis is changed due to intensive agriculture practices. Technically they have changed their genetic basis, and therefore their manifestation and the toxic profile is not in keeping with health.
Okay. I see. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. But generally, you know, when a person takes, again, whole foods plant-based, that is very difficult to get sick, I'm telling you. I'm just answering that question to Deva.
So Ananda, what is the meaning of whole food actually?
Whole foods?
Whole means, what is the real meaning of whole?
Oh, whole foods is basically to take in the most natural form. Like for example, දැන් අපට මේ අමුයෙන් කන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් තියෙනවානේ. අමුයෙන් කන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් අමුයෙන් කන්න. දැන් අපි හිතමු දැන් process කරන්න නැති food, non processed food. Now when for example when we අපි potatoes අපට තම්මලා කන්න පුළුවන්, උයලා කන්න පුළුවන්, that's fine, normal way of cooking. But when you fry all the time and put salt and everything and keep it in the bags for months in the in the store and when you eat like that, process කරන් පස්සේ කියන්නේ මොනවාරි කරලා කාලෙත් තියලා කනකොට ඒක තමයි හොඳ නැහැ කියලා. කියන්නේ සීනි වලින් හදන ගොඩක් දේවල් ඉතින් vegan නේ.
So that means that that maintains its naturality, ne?
Yeah. Go to the natural form as much as possible. Whole food.
So
අපිට juice doctor අපිට juice එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන් නේ. දැන් අපි හිතමු අපි දැන් කඩේ තියෙන orange juice, right? Pure vegan orange juice තියෙනවා. Organic එකක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් එතන තියෙන්නේ ඒ orange juice එකේ තියෙන්නේ ඒ juice ටික. now fiber ටික එතෙන්ට එන්නේ නැහැ. අපි ඒක මේ ඒකෙන් එතන there are some good stuff, but in the same time they add sugar onto it, and a lot of added sugars plus less the stuff from the whole food. Like අපි orange එක අරගෙන කෑවොත් එහෙම නැත්නම් apple ගෙඩියක් අරගෙන කෑවොත් ඒකේ තියෙන skin එකයි ඒකේ තියෙන ඔක්කොම දේවල් ටික අපිට එනවා. ඒකේ තියෙන vitamins ටික එනවා, ඒකේ තියෙන ලවණ වර්ගයේ ඔක්කොම එනවා. ඔක්කොම ටික එනවා. නමුත් අපි ඒක juice එකක් හදලා කඩේ තියෙන orange juice එකක් බිව්වොත් ඒකේ තියෙන්නේ බොහොම ටිකයි අර තියෙන අර whole foods, ඒ කියන්නේ සම්පූර්ණ ගෙඩිය තියෙන දේවල් වලින් ගොඩක් නැහැ එතන. අන්න ඒ වගේ.
අතරම එතන අර
ගෙඩිය පිටින් කන්න. අන්න ඒ වගේ කියන්නේ.
food එක natural වෙන්න අතරම natural food කියන අපි price කරන්න නම් food එකක් අතන food එක naturally grow කරන්නත් ඕන.
naturally grow කරන්නත් ඕනේ. ඉතින් ඒකට ගොඩක් add-ons තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ හොඳ පසක. දැන් සමහරකට පස්සේ හොඳ nutrients එකෙන් පස්සේ ඒක මේ අවශ්‍ය දේවල් ඒ ගෙඩියේ නැහැ. දැන් අපි දන්නවා පෝර හොඳ සාමාන්‍ය පෝර තියෙන පසක හැදෙන ගොටකොලයකුයි පෝර නැත්නම් එක හැදෙන ගොටකොලයකයි අර කහ වෙලා ඒක නිකන් මැලවිලා, ඒ කියන්නේ අර ගහ හැදුනට ඒකට අවශ්‍ය nutrients නැතිවෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. ඉතින් ඒවා අපිට ඒ තරමට මේක විශ්ලේෂණය කරනකොට හරි වටිනවා. ඇත්තටම අපි ඉතින් යමක් කරනවා නම් අපි ගෙදරක හදනවා නම් ඒ හරි පෝර හොයා ගන්න ඕනේ මොනවද කියලා. දැන් අපි දන්නවා ඕගැනික් අර විස රසායන දාන්න නැති ඕගැනික් පෝර. ඒ අවශ්‍ය ඒ ගැනත් ඇත්තටම යම් කිසි දැනුමක් තියෙනවා මේ වගාව සම්බන්ධයෙන්. මේ පොඩි සාමාන්‍ය අපේ ගමේ ගොඩේ තිබිච්ච දැනුම් සම්භාරය තමයි අපිට නැත්තේ දැන්. ඒ ටික තියෙනවා නම් අපිට හොඳ ආහාර අපේ ගෙවත්තේම හදා ගන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් උදාහරණයකට මම කියන්නම් මම දැන් හැමදාම උදේට මගේ තියෙනවා මේ ගොටකොළ ටිකයි මුකුණු වෙන්න ටිකයි, එතකොට මේ තියෙනවා මින් කියලා මින්චි කියලා ලංකාවෙත් තියෙනවා ඒවා. ඔය ගෝ වර්ගයේ කොලාඩ් වගේ පැලෑටි කීපයක් හදාගෙන තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මට මගේ උදේ ජූස් එකට මේ ස්මූති එකට අවශ්‍ය කොළ ටික මම හැමදාම ගන්නේ මගේ ගෙවත්තෙන්. ඒකට peer කොළ දානවා, ඒකට මිදි කොළ දානවා. ඉතින් එහෙම මේ මට මතකයි ලස්සන අපේ හොඳ දන්න හාමුදුරුවමක් ඉන්නවනේ උදේරිකම ධම්මජීව හාමුදුරුවෝ කියලා නිස්සාරණවනේ. ඒ හාමුදුරුවෝ කියපු දෙයක් වුණ මතක් වුණා. ඔය එක මේ දානයකදී මේක මේ මෙඩිටේෂන් රිට්‍රීට් එකකදී හාමුදුරුවන්ගේ අම්මා පුංචි කාලේ එළියට ගිහිල්ලා මොනවා හරි කොළ ටිකක් කඩාගෙන එනවලු. දකින්න කොළ. ඒ කියන්නේ කන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් රසකොළක් තියෙනවා. ඔය කුප්පමේනියා, එතකොට ඔය තියෙන්නේ මොනවද මේ මොනර කුඩුම්බි අරවා මේවා ගෙනහල්ලා පොඩි මල්ලමක් හදලා කන්න දෙනවලු මේගොල්ලන්. ඒක වරද්දන්නේ නැති දෙයක්ලු මේ හාමුදුරුවන්ගේ. ඒ හාමුදුරුවෝ මට මතකයි කිව්වා. ඉතින් ඒක හරි ලස්සන concept එකක්. අපි දැනගන්න ඕනේ මොනවද අපේ ගෙවත්තේ තියෙන කන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් කියලා. බොහෝ දේවල් කන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් අපට අවශ්‍ය fiber දැන් අපි ගොඩාක් මේ දොස්තරලා කියන දෙයක් තමයි වෛද්‍යවරු මේ අපි අහන ඕන ප්‍රශ්නේ ප්‍රෝටීන් නෙමෙයි. ප්‍රෝටීන් මිත් එක. ප්‍රෝටීන් නැති වෙලා මැරිච්ච මිනිහෙකුත් නැහැනේ. ප්‍රෝටීන් නැහැ කියලා ලෙඩක් අපි දන්නේ නැහැ සාමාන්‍ය මිනිස්සු අතරේ. අහන්න ඕනේ fiber ගැන. තන්තු අපට ලැබෙන්නේ කොහෙන්ද කියලා. මේ තන්තු වලින් තමයි මේ කරන දේවල් ඔක්කොම කරන්නේ. දැන් මයික්‍රෝබයෝම් එක මේ ඔය gut බැක්ටීරියා වලට කොළ වලින් තමයි ඒක ෆීඩ් වෙන්නේ. නැතු මස් වලින් නෙමෙයි. මස් එක ඩැමේජ් කරලා දානවා. දැන් colon cancers වගේ දේවල් වලට දැන් අත්‍තරම කියනවනේ මේ මයික්‍රෝබයෝම් එක තමයි මේ අපේ ඇඟේ තියෙන හොඳම ඕගන් එක කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ හොඳම ක්‍රියාකාරී ප්‍රදේශය කියලා. ඉතින් ඒකට හරියට ෆීඩ් වෙන්නේ නැහැ කොළ කන්නේ නැත්තම්. මස් කෑවොත් ඒක විනාශ වෙලා යනවා. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ මේ විශාල දැනුමක් අපි මේ තියෙනවා මේක හරහා අපි දැනගත යුතුයි. මේ මම දන්නේ මම කියපු දේ හරියද කියලා ડોක්ටර් දහනාගේ මේ හරි උත්තරේද ලැබුණේ කියන එක.
ෆයිබර් මත තමයි මයික්‍රෝබ්ස්
feed making. Yeah, fiber is for the bacteria, good bacteria, microns. All right, මම හිතන්නේ අපේ වෙලාව දැන් පැය දෙකකටත් වඩා ගත වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපි එහෙමනම් මේ සාකච්ඡාව මෙතනින් අවසන් කරමු. දැන් මේක අපි රෙකෝඩ් කරලා තියෙන්නේ YouTube හරහා ලැබෙන්න සලසන්න පුළුවන්. ඒකල මතක් කරන්නට ඕනේ මේ ඉදිරියටත් මේ වගේ අපි ලෙක්චර් සීරීස් එකක් සංවිධානය කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. බොහෝ මේ වෛද්‍යවරු මේකට කැමැත්ත පළ කරලා තියෙනවා, මේ ඇමරිකානු වෛද්‍යවරු. ඇත්තට මේ මිනිස්සු මේ මම නම් මේ දේවත්වයෙන් සලකන වෛද්‍යවරු දැන් අද හිටියේ ડોક્ટર ක්ලැපර්, ડોક્ટર නීල් බර්නාඩ්, ડોક્ટર මයිකල් ග්‍රෙගර්, එතකොට ડોક્ટર මිල්ටන් මිල්ස්, ડોક્ટર කොලින් කැම්බල්, මේගොල්ලන්ගේ මේ නම් ටිකක් හොයාගෙන Google කරලා මේගොල්ලන්ගේ ඕන තරම් තියෙනවා YouTubes මේ ගැන කතා කරන. මේගොල්ලෝ තමන්ගේ ශ්‍රමය උගක් කරලා නොමිලේ පරිත්‍යාග කරනවා මේ ලෝකයේ මිනිසුන්ගේ පැවැත්ම සඳහා. ඉතාමත්ම හරි උතුම් උත්තරී මනුෂ්‍ය ධර්ම තියෙන පුද්ගලයෝ මේගොල්ලෝ. ඉතින් ආශ්‍රය කරන ලැබීමත් ඇත්තටම මට නම් ලොකු පිනක් කියලා මම හිතනවා. ඉතින් අපි මේ අය ඉදිරියට ගේන්න උත්සාහ කරනවා ඉදිරියට. ඉතින් ලංකාවේ මේ ડોક્ટર දහනායක වගේ, ડોક્ટર හැරිස් පතරගේ, ડોક્ટર අනුරුද්ධ පාදේනිය, ડોક્ટર වාසන් සුජීවා මේ අපි මේ වෛද්‍යවරු තව ගොඩාක් ඉන්නවා. ඉතින් මේ උතුම් වෛද්‍යවරුත් එළියට අරගෙන සම්බන්ධ වෙලා මේ රට අපේ රට සුඛිත මුදිත කරන්න පුළුවන් තරම් හැකි හැම දෙයක්ම කරමු කියන අධිෂ්ඨානයේ ප්‍රාර්ථනාවේ සහ ඉල්ලීමත් කරමින් අපි එහෙනම් මේ අවස්ථාවේදී මේ කතාව අවසන් කරනවා. මෙතින් නැවතවරක් මතක් කරනවා මේකට සම්බන්ධ වෙච්ච දායක වෙච්ච පිරිස්. ડોક્ટર අනුරුද්ධ පාදිනියගේ ශ්‍රී සංවිධානය, ඒ කියන්නේ Society for Health Research and Nutrition. and මම ડોક્ટર පාදිනිය මුලින්ම කතා කරාම ડોક્ટર මෙහෙම අයිඩියා එකක් තියෙනවා මේක කරමුද ලංකාවේ කියලා. බොහොම කැමැත්ත පළ කරා. පස්සේ එයාගේ ටීම් එකම එකට සම්බන්ධ කරලා ඒ අවශ්‍ය ෆ්ලයර්ස් දේවල් හැදුවෙත් ඒගොල්ලෝමයි. ડોક્ટર වාසන් ත්‍යාගසිංහ මතක් කරන්න ඕනේ බොහොම සම්බන්ධ වෙලා මේකට උදව් කරා අපට. ඒකලම ડોક્ટર කුමුද් දහනායක, ડોક્ટર සුජීවා, ડોક્ટર හැරිස් පත්‍රගේ වගේ වෛද්‍යවරු ලංකාවේ මේ ෆුඩ් ප්‍රොමෝෂන් කැම්පේන් එක දේශීය ආහාර indigenous food promotion and monitoring task force එකේ ඉන්නවා. ඒක ජනාධිපති කාර්යාලය හරහා ව්‍යාප්ත වෙන දෙයක්. ඒවා ඇත්තට මේක තමයි සිද්ධ වෙන්න ඕනේ. අපි මිනිස්සු මේ දැනුවත් කිරීම. ඉතින් කටන පින්කම් දානමාන හරහා හරි මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි තව ඉදිරියට මේ කතා කරමු. දැන් මම ඇමරිකාවෙත් ඇත්තටම පන්සල් කීපයකටම කතා කරා. ඒගොල්ලෝ කැමති ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලා මේ concept එකට යන්න. අපි මේක සම්බන්ධ වෙලා කරමු. ඉතින් සියලු දෙනාම මේ දැනුවත් වීම බෙහෙවින්ම ප්‍රයෝජනවත් වෙන්න ඇති කියලා මේ අවස්ථාවේදී කල්පනා කරනවා. එහෙනම් අපි හැම දිනාටම ස්තුතියි කියමු වෙන ප්‍රශ්න මොනවාක්වත් නැත්තම්. හොඳයි නේද ડોක්ටර්? එහෙනම් අපි නවතුමු නේද? හරි. සියලු දෙනාටම සුබ දවසක් වේවා. ડોક્ટર හැරිස් මොනවද කියන්න ඕනද නැහැනේ? හරි.